Hey everybody, what's going on? Rob Cesternino back here with you for some Survivor 43 Tribe previews. Can you believe it? And here I am back with the man who is deep in the Survivor preseason trenches. Here he is. Give it up for Mike Bloom.
Yeah, certainly not my first tour with this company, but excited to be here. We're going to get messy with Vesi
Get
today,
messy
Rob.
with Vesi.
Yeah,
Talk about the Vesi boys, and I wish we were talking about Vesi girls.
And ironically enough, we are talking about a guy named Jesse, so I think it actually all matches up very well. Do you think that they're just like, well, we got a guy named Jesse, we got to put him on Vesi, right?
Yes. I'm sure that in the production tents, they were dying.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you have a literal poetry existing within your Survivor preseason, you have to make it happen. And we're hoping to write some poems over the course of these next 3 podcasts. Previewing these contestants, Rob, you and I did a little bit of like a first impressions, general overview of the cast, but a few days ago. But now we're really getting ourselves elbows deep into the fake blood and mud and smearing it all over each other.
That's right.
Ironically enough, the color of the buffs that this tribe is wearing.
Okay, so if you've never listened to one of these before, Mike Bloom has submitted. This is the new era, okay? Mike Bloom sends in a bunch of interview questions. The survivors, before they go into the game, and I think it's debatable, are they in quarantine or are they, is that how this works?
I believe they're in quarantine. If I'm remembering like my timing correctly, it's a few days before the game starts. So they are still they're on the island in a manner of speaking, but the lodgings that they get are not necessarily, like the tents that they might be staying in. Maybe once upon a time back in your day, Rob. I know that with some seasons, sometimes the contestants would like kind of slum it a bit, sort of like a halfway house between Civilization and Survivor. They're in their hotels. They're sort of getting like shepherded around to do press days. And so we're talking with them just a few days, though, before they go out and play this 26-day adventure.
One of these days, Mike, I'll get into telling some stories with my pregame Ponderosa from Survivor the Amazon. All Stars was totally weird. Okay. But that's not what we're here to do today. Okay.
No, we're here to break down the 6 members of the aforementioned Vesi tribe. So yeah, I got the chance to submit the questions. I was not able to speak with them live, but I am grateful to CBS. Rob, you and I sort of put our heads together to come up with a list of questions, and a good assortment of them were asked to these contestants. Just to make things a little bit more seamless, as if I was there, I recorded my audio on my end for the question. So it at least seems like I was in the room talking with the person, but we have their answers from those interviews, which we're going to play through. We also have the bios that were posted on the day the cast released, as well as the 1-minute social media videos, maybe some other stuff that happened to come in from some of these other people who have, professional careers that live online outside of Survivor. So yeah, this is really going to be the big glance that we get at these 18 contestants before they go out onto the island, and like all of our assumptions about everything gets completely thrown out the window.
Okay. Now, Mike, I know this is just one of the things you're doing here in the Survivor preseason. What do you have going on in the written variety for what you're writing?
Yeah, not for variety, for parade.com.
Of course. Yes.
But when it comes to the written word, so yeah, I am doing essentially written versions of these interviews. Look, some people like the podcast video version better. Some people like the written word better. I think you'll also figure out that like tone can come across in different ways based on your medium, but I'm doing 2 interviews a day over at parade.com. I started there with the Baka tribe just to like give a little bit of a different sense of getting to know the cast as quickly as possible. At the time probably this podcast is released, I'll have my first 4 interviews out there. I'm releasing 2 interviews a day at 10 and 2. So I will have talked about Ellie, Janine, Mike Gabler, and Mariah, I believe. And so Vesi we'll get to at the end of next week. But, I decided to start with Baka just to get, in my opinion, maybe a bit of the goofus to the gallant of Vesi. Overall take, Rob, I think with Vesi from a lot of Survivor fans is that looking at them at the outset, this is our Taku, this is our Luvu tribe in the new era of probably not going to go to a lot of tribal councils.
Okay. All right. We will see. why don't we start to bring this in, and we'll talk about our 6 players here today. This is the first of 3 of these episodes. Of course, you will get them all when you are subscribed to Rob Has a Podcast. You go to robhasawebsite.com/subscribe. However you want to get your Survivor podcast, whether you want to get all things RHAP, that'll get you all of the shows hosted by me, or if you want our Survivor only podcast feed, which has a bunch of other Survivor content, including Mike and Liana hosting the RHAP B&B week after week. Once we get into the season, all of those links are at robhasawebsite.com/subscribe. All right, Mike, who's up first?
All right, so we are starting with a biggin first. We're starting with Cody Assenmacher, a 35-year-old elevator salesman from Honolulu, Hawaii, via way of Iowa. I think as we get into Cody's interview, I think it'll make sense as to why I chose to start with the Vesi tribe, because Cody is a mood and a half. Very excited to find out a little bit more about him and, the island vibes in particular that he is going to bring to a very different island.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and start with Cody. When you said we'll start with the begin, that I noticed that his interview seems like it's about twice the file size of everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, listen, these interviews, it's a good point, actually, Rob, that I will lay out a couple of qualifiers at the beginning of all of this. So these interviews were conducted virtually over Zoom. So there were occasionally blips that happened due to connection issues. I did try to edit around that, but again, apologies if it's not the most crystal clear audio. Something is better than nothing. And yes, they very much vary in terms of length and also questions asked. So some of them end up being about 5 minutes long. In the case of Cody, to your point, it is about twice as much. But as you can see, Cody maybe fits twice as much personality than maybe your typical Survivor contestant. So yeah, these interviews might vary in length. I think that's also why it's a good idea that we bring in other things like the bios and supplementary material when the interview length is maybe a bit more variable.
Okay. And then Mike, we like to stop down sometimes when we are going to have something that we want to interject with. Do you have a suggestion for what we should call out today?
So I know with 42, we were talking about 41 with the phrases. Should we capitulate upon the 42 or capitalize on the 42 phrases when talking about 43?
Well, that would require me to remember what they were at this juncture.
So
there was the soccer.
There was bunny rabbit in the mailbox.
Yeah.
And then there was potatoes have skin, of course, infamously.
Of course,
I have skin in
my
potato.
Yes. Wow, that was all in the year 2022. Can you believe it?
That was 3 months ago that this is happening. It's again, time is a flat circle.
Yes. Okay. So, what would you like to say for Vesi?
Let's go with, since this is our Taku tribe, we can go with either bunny rabbit or mailbox.
Okay. I think mailbox is easier to blurt out.
Yeah, mailbox I think sounds I think mailbox sounds good. So
Okay.
And it also sounds weird enough that if we just randomly say the word mailbox, it will be sort of a cue to stop down, because you never know when I'll just say bunny rabbit in my normal life.
Right. Okay. And we will try to break in sparingly that we will. This will be a 9-hour podcast if we come in with every single thought that we have, but we will, break in when we have something that needs addressing. Okay. All right. So without further ado, let's bring you what Cody had to say.
To start off, tell us about yourself. Give us your name, age, and occupation.
Aloha, my name is Cody Osmacher. I am 35 years old, and I am the sales executive at an elevator and escalator company.
Why are you here on Survivor?
I am here to play Survivor to win $1 million. I live in Hawaii, and it's sure expensive, so I could use the money. And let's be honest, coming out here with nothing for nothing would be preposterous. I could do that in my backyard with some burgers and beers, and when the mosquitoes start to bite, I could drive home and sleep in my own bed. So my driving force is the cash prize.
What's your history with watching Survivor?
I remember when Survivor first aired and my neighbors coming to my house and insisting we change the channel to CBS and tell us to watch this show, Survivor, because people were chasing chickens and, it's something we could relate to coming from a small town in Iowa. And since then, I quit watching, but during the pandemic, I became a binge watcher and, watched multiple episodes. And through watching it, I was like, I have the skills to participate and win this game.
Give me one
mailbox. Okay. Mike. Yeah. Gone are the days when your neighbors would burst into your front door a la Cosmo Kramer and say, like, are you watching this? Turn it on.
I'm just imagining
they're chasing chickens.
Iowa Kramer bursted in like, you gotta say this. They're chasing chickens, Jerry. Kenny, get that Kenny Rogers roasters out of your mouth. We're talking about a different type of chicken. Who would have thought, though, that was like the commonality? You and I talked about this with Maggie Morgan a couple weeks ago, and I would play out list about like the initial maybe misappropriated appeal of Survivor early on of like, oh my God, they're eating grubs, they're eating rats. People find different things in Survivor. I think that's the number one reason why the show is still on to this day, has been going strong for 20 plus years. Some people like the chicken chasing. Evidently, Boston Rob didn't in his first season, but some people might.
I don't remember that being a big part of Survivor Borneo, but like maybe it's a little bit of a Mandela effect.
Yeah, I mean, it also could be that, the monitor lizards were chasing the chickens, were they not?
Sure.
When they devoured breakfast and lunch. Yeah, I have a feeling, Rob, I don't want to call my shot too much or like put my thumbs on the scale. I think Cody is probably going to be one of your main impressions of this season.
It's like, okay, good. I like to get our big characters. I mean, it's one of the things that I love about Survivor. I like when we get really, interesting and unusual folks playing Survivor.
And Cody, I think, is both of them. He's got a little bit of like a Zoolander tone to him as well. Like he talks a little bit like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's see where else Cody is going to take us.
And win this game.
Give me one Survivor winner and one non-winner who you identify with the most.
The one Survivor winner, which is probably a commonly answered and maybe cliche, but is Tony. The reason being is I think Tony has the fundamentals of the game of Survivor in his strategy. And that is, 1, have fun, 2, compete, and 3, just provide. And whether it be, comic relief when times are tough, or helping out around the fire, whatever it is. I think he holds the values of Survivor in his strategy, and clearly he's good at the game because he's done well for himself. The 2 guys that I can think of that didn't win that relatable would be, somebody like Ozzy or Malcolm. Both those guys were, similar. They were very competitive, very social, and had a lot of fun playing the game. And, that's the beauty of Survivor, that there is a safety net. Even if you fall short of that $1 million, you're going to leave with a lot of fun memories and experiences, and probably come out of the game a better person than when you came into it.
What's your favorite moment in Survivor history?
I think some of my favorite memories of Survivor are the challenges when people are eating some of the gnarly foods, whether it's a half an egg that has been partially grown into a chicken, or a pile of worms, or whatever it may be, because the facial reactions, the ability of some of the players to put down some food that looks nasty, I can't imagine the textures and the smell, was absolutely incredible. So those memories of people eating those things that I was getting sick just looking at from a TV perspective, I can't imagine them, standing in front of it, smelling it and tasting it. I was a huge fan of Fear Factor, and that was always in there. And I was just like, ooh, bro, I don't know how they do it. I've eaten some gross stuff as a kid, being just the knucklehead that I am, but I don't know if I can, the strategies of it. Like some people are swallowing it whole. I'm like, now it's sitting your stomach. I don't know if that's much better to have a whole worm in your stomach. Like, yeah, the facial expressions crack me up.
Mailbox. Mike, this was his answer to what is your favorite Survivor moment?
This has to be, I think, like number 300 on the list for, I'd say it's 75% of Survivor fans out there. What is your favorite Survivor moment? Quote, the challenges where they eat the gnarly foods.
22 years.
I also will say that I think we have now found a new title for that type of challenge, thanks to Cody. I know there's been a lot of discourse in the past few years of like, let's stop calling it the gross food challenge because these are local delicacies and it feels a little Amerocentric. Cody, I think, rebranded them into the gnarly foods challenge.
Yeah, because really you could have it both ways where it's like, yeah, like, or that's gnarly. No, it's like, no, gnarly good.
Exactly.
Like this is a delicacy.
That's the thing about island life, man. Using things like gnarly, sick. It's all about turning negatives into positives. And that's who Cody is as a person. But yeah, this tickled me to no end, much like, I guess, the feeling of swallowing an entire worm.
Yeah, that will tickle you from the inside. Yeah.
I also love that Cody's like, oh yeah, like when you eat, half-formed chicken or like a pile of worms. I can't recall when anyone's ever had to eat a pile of worms. I don't know if that's an Iowa thing that, again, you were chasing chickens and eating piles of worms, but I can't remember that personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, great plug for myself and Mike Bloom and Maggie Morgan. That most recently we did one of our off-season Survivor podcasts, Outwit, Outplay, Outlist, talked about the all-time greatest Survivor food moments. A couple of those moments were from the gnarly food competitions.
Do you think if he were in the situation, he would pull a Denise and just start screaming as he shoves worms in his mouth?
Maybe. I don't know. He might be like screaming with delight. He loves it. It's his favorite moment.
Oh, gnarly. Oh, radical.
All right, let's go back to Cody.
One life experience you feel has prepared you most for the game.
On this journey, I've had the ability, I'm from Iowa and I've moved around a lot. I've had the ability and I've been blessed to have traveled and seen some places. But I think the one thing that will help me in the game of Survivor was my transition from the mainland to Hawaii. Hawaii is a unique place. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The aloha spirit and everybody and the culture is something.
Yes.
Cody just shout out the late Mikhail Gorbachev accidentally in his sentence.
In what way?
He said, it's Gorbachev. It's gorgeous.
Let me see. I didn't catch that, but.
Place. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The aloha spirit and everybody.
And we'll see if Cody tears down any walls in his gameplay between him and
he
other
was a
contestants.
fan. He was a fan.
That port wine stain, gnarly, bro.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Back to Cody.
And the culture is something that is fantastic, but living in Hawaii and visiting Hawaii are two different things. And there is a stereotype that, the locals don't necessarily like when, people come to their island and, start working there. You have to earn their trust. And moving to Hawaii put me really out of my element. I had never lived by the ocean, never been in a tropical environment, never had the cuisine that they eat there. So it threw me for a 360, and being able to adapt quickly to the change of culture, of people, of food, I think will allow me to really adapt here to the game of Survivor, because being able to relate to, I believe, anybody is very important. And then that experience of moving to Hawaii did that.
Yep.
And that experience will also help me because that island lifestyle and the things I've learned in Hawaii will be helpful here in Fiji.
Mailbox. Okay, so I don't know if it's all the Hawaii talk or the facial hair or the wild shirt, but I feel like, Mike, do you get at all from Cody that if we were going to cast some sort of Survivor White Lotus, which has many different Survivor connections from Mike White to Alec Merlino, could you see Cody as being the Armand of the season?
Well, I think more so maybe the other recipient of some of Armand's play, I should say, considering how much we talked about Cody's ass tattoos.
Yes. Okay. You know what? Not gonna.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, though. Not the White Lotus, but I do completely agree. I think Cody, unfortunately, ends up missing the boat. I think if he was cast on Survivor even like a couple of years earlier, I think Mike Light been like, Cody, can we do you have any availability on Tuesday from 4 to 7 to come in and be an extra? Because he absolutely has those vibes. But let's talk about the ass tattoo for a second here, because this is something that you and I debated.
For Cody A, yes.
Yeah, still a little bit in and out on. So he talks again in the Survivor 42 trailer. I live to get radical. I even have it tattooed on my butt cheek. And we really debated, like, okay, is it live to get radical? Is it just get radical? Further confusing thing. So we have, again, these 1-minute social media videos getting to know the contestants. Cody says there, oh, I have living tattooed on my butt cheek. So I am flummoxed as to what exactly this dude has on his Assenmacher. Yeah. Could this be like a Mad Magazine fold-in where like it's printed across 2 butt cheeks? And just depending on where it configures and everything, you could have different phrases show up at any different times.
I guess so. I'm trying to think of some other variables, but maybe let's just get back to what Cody has to say. Okay. All right. Here's Cody.
What excites you the most about the new era of Survivor?
Obviously, Survivor has changed, and change is inevitable. And embrace the change. I'm excited for the pace of play. There is no time in this fast-paced game to dwell on bad decisions. I mean, they're going to be made all the time. I'm a believer that you don't have to be right all the time. You just have to be right 51% of the time. I mean, Vegas was built on those odds. And in a game that is played this quickly, you have to be able to just play it as if one in a row. Every conversation, every tribal, every challenge, one in a row. And the speed of the game is going to be a lot of fun. And I think me coming in at 35 and looking at the rest of the competitors, I found that I'm probably in the top quartile age-wise, and I think that's going to be advantageous because in a game that comes this quick, it's important to also be level-headed. So that level-headed will allow me to sift through the bullshit and stay within my lanes and between the ditches to make the right decisions as I navigate through to the final jury.
Mailbox. Mike, so Cody raises an interesting point. He compares Survivor to being like a Vegas gambler. Like if you were going to be like a professional gambler betting on different sporting events, hey, if you're right 51% of the time, you're making money. Okay. Do you feel like that analogy holds for Survivor?
I mean, it's always been an interesting discussion point as to how much luck is involved in Survivor gameplay. And it sort of has been both weighed for and against it, I feel like, in the new era, right? With all these advantages where now there are decisions weighed behind each advantage. So it's not just like, okay, find the thing and now you have the thing. But on the other hand, there are also things that just pop up from time to time that might make it seem more luck-based. I mean, certainly when it comes to like the gamification aspect of it. I mean, hell, Do or Die is pretty much a casino game, is it not?
Yeah, but I just want to make a distinction because a casino game, sure, like you play roulette, you win 51% of the time, you're making money, but I don't think that in the game of Survivor, you can be right 51% of the time and have that be, because I feel like that there's so much of Survivor is you make one mistake and you're gone from the game. I mean, one mistake could be fatal. So I feel like that's sort of like a false idea of that. As long as I'm making more correct reads and decisions than I'm making bad ones, I made, 20 good decisions and 19 bad decisions. That doesn't sound like somebody who's going to win the game. Now, in just looking back to Survivor 42, I mean, Marianne did make mistakes. So I don't know. Like, I guess it's like if it's that Tony attitude of like, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes, but if I have enough hustle, I'll be able to correct the mistakes. And as long as I'm sort of like net positive, that'll win. But I'm a little nervous that I feel like that's not the way I would look at Survivor.
Yeah, it really depends, I think, on the timbre of the cast. If there is one of these more train wrecky seasons where like everyone's making mistakes, then yeah, it's very much like, okay, the person who has made the least amount of mistakes or the most positively skewed mistakes in relation to the negative mistakes will end up winning. But I do agree with you that I feel like usually it is the cleaner game overall that ends up winning. So I think it really depends. Again, I think a lot of the things that people are taking away from this cast in general is that this could be a messier cast in terms of personality. So this might be Cody's messy cast that he desires. But I agree, let's go back to his analogy. Like, I don't know, 51% of the time on a typical Survivor season, if he is necessarily winning with this ideal of, all right, just take the shots. And as long as you hit more than half the time, then that's a winning game.
I feel like, look at Omer. I feel like that those are guys that I would say they probably made like 80% of the right decisions, like maybe, higher than that. But it's one wrong decision like at the wrong time that ultimately costs you on Survivor.
Yeah. And another interesting thing that I want to bring up from his 1-minute video is he talks about, despite coming from such disparate backgrounds, right, in Iowa, Kramer, and in Hawaii, they both sort of share this commonality of being more of a small town environment that is all about, to his point, commitments and handshakes. It's this idea of like, you look someone in the eye, you shake your hand, everyone knows each other, so you have to be a man of your word. Does not necessarily sound like the game of Survivor. And that's not to say that like you have to outright lie about everything. We'll get into somebody later on in this podcast who is like outright said they're not good at lying. And I don't think that completely sinks your chance in doing at least relatively well on Survivor. But I think if that's a lifestyle you have lived for so long, it might be really tough to break, or at least tough to break while like simultaneously justifying your own gameplay. We saw this last season with Mike, right? Mike Turner comes from this environment where he is very much like honor bound, loyalty bound, plays one of, in my opinion, one of the more duplicitous games of the season. As a result, gets to the end, sort of not having that keen awareness as to the duplicity that he was conducting about himself. Cody doesn't necessarily seem to be particularly in that mold, but I think he is coming from a similar type of environment of like, can I play and understand a dishonest game when I have been living in such honest environments my entire life?
Okay, let's go back to Cody.
Jury.
What do you think people will perceive you as?
It's going to be interesting. I think the perception of me, I came in, wearing a mullet with some lightning bolts in the side of my hair, and it may be perceived as, attention seeking or crazy, or maybe just put a big target on my back. But the reality is that's just who I am. This is Cody. This is the style that I've always had. I don't always wear lightning bolts, but on special occasions, I did it all the time when I was a kid, maybe a 4th of July or a birthday. But I think you're going to perceive me as the crazy Hawaiian. I believe they're going to, hopefully take my big energy and use it as their shield through the game. I don't want to be sitting on the back burner and get drug along. I don't want to be a middle-level player. I want to be somebody completely different. And I think my personality, my big personality, will allow me to be a shield. And, my aloha spirit of kind of laid back cruise in a lot of situations will also have them underestimating me. And that underestimating they won't realize that, in the background, as I've been telling people, I got that the relationship building in the front, the wily strategization in the back. I'm hoping that my perception of the laid back, crazy Hawaiian will get them to think that I'm not a threat in this game, that I'm not a serious player, and that will project me through, again, to the final jury.
Mailbox.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I apologize that we keep stopping down, but like Cody is providing some really key answers here. I should mention that there is a visual that is sort of missing, but he does bring this up again in his 1-minute video when he's talking about relationship building in the front and wildly strategization, as he puts it, in the back. He is referencing his hair. He is referencing the mullet that he has.
Yes, the mullet is a metaphor. Okay. Got it, everybody?
Every haircut is purposeful. Cody is thinking fourth dimensionally right now, complete with the lightning bolts. He wants to show how electric he can be in this game.
He's got the final tribal council speech written, okay? I showed you who I was on day one. It was business in the front, party in the back.
Exactly. And now you're looking behind me, just seeing all party.
Mull it over, people.
If this guy lasts 26 days, what do you think his hair is going to look like? I feel like we've had very few mulleted players play Survivor, and I got to imagine, especially with the lightning bolts, it's going to grow in very awkwardly.
Yeah. Well, we would love to see it. Maybe is that another list? I mean, all-time greatest mullets, but besides Shambo.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, like Chris Doherty, I don't think his really counted as a mullet. I think it was just more so like long hair.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, this is Cody's image in a nutshell. And I think to look a bit ahead as to like how I think Cody will do in the game, like I think this is a guy personally you could peg for at least merge onwards. I especially in this new era, right, where it is all about like we're starving, we don't have anything. I think Cody's going to be looked at as like a big physical aspect as well as a camp provider. Considering all the amount of time that he has spent, on a very different island. And I think despite his want to become the Chaos Cody in a manner of speaking, I can see early on how, especially people are perceiving him to his point as like a bit of the Fabio nature, right? Of like, brash, dumb, young guy, or even though he is, again, in the top quartile, as he says, age-wise, I think that's not necessarily a reason to eyeball him early on as like, we got to get rid of this guy ASAP.
I'm really interested to see where this goes from here with the rest of this tribe, because I think this was a really interesting person to pull first for this, because I feel like, okay, that there could be people who get Cody, and then also I feel like that he also could have potential like, who is this jackass energy, where I could see different people, who I could see different people really not getting along with this.
I don't know. I feel like Cody is so laid back, or at least he wants to come across it as such that, he's saying some very fun, very weird things. Again, I'm going back to Fabio. Like, I think there is this goofball energy with him, like a Seabass almost as well, if we're comparing to like a more modern day character that I think can endear yourself to people. I don't necessarily see Cody getting on anybody's nerves on this tribe unless he is really out front and like insists on being a leader, especially when it comes to the camp stuff. But again, I just think that given the vibe that I'm perceiving from Cody so far, I don't necessarily see him as that. I know he said he didn't want to be on the back burner, but I could very much see him as just like, yeah, whatever, come to me with the plan. I'll do whatever I need to do as long as it, falls into my own 51% of positive outcomes.
Okay, let's go back to Cody.
I'm traveling.
What type of player are you looking for in an alliance?
I think my number one alliance player is going to be somebody quite different than me. And I'm searching for that, because whether it's
shouldn't be hard to find,
whether it's, things that they're interested in, personality, because that allows me to have that direct connection to a whole nother population of players that I may not, or probably won't be able to get a connection with. And that will allow me to have that bridge to two different groups of contestants, and having that, essential, two paper cups, from one room to the next, understanding what's going on will be a huge advantage in navigating through the game.
How eager will you be to look for advantages in the game?
I will be very eager to look for advantages in the game. Again, this is a new era and it goes quick. And in looking at the last couple of seasons, there's more advantages now than ever. So if you don't have one, you're SOL, because the majority of the people have one, or they have two, or maybe three. So you have to be eager in this game where you're getting left in the dust. Now, saying that, I also have to remind myself to be patient and look for the right opportunity, because there's, a big old target that's drawn on your back if you go after it immediately as well. So I am going to send it when looking for advantages, because that's the only thing I know.
Mailbox, did he say I'm going to send it?
Oh, yeah. Maybe he's watching a little too much Big Brother. Can we go back for a second to his alliance question? Because I still don't really understand the metaphor, Rob. Maybe you do. I believe the quote is, having 2 paper cups from one room to the next, understanding what's going on will be a huge advantage in navigating the game. What is this a metaphor for? I know we talk a lot about metaphors.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much a metaphor. I think he's literally talking about like when somebody has like a cup and then the other person has another cup and there's a string and then you can like use it as sort of like a very like a toy phone. I don't know if that works. Maybe if the string is like pulled taut enough, maybe there's some sort of like conduction that goes through the string. But I think that is what he's referring to.
Back in Iowa, that's our tree mail. We use 2 cups with a string between them.
Yeah, like hey, are you watching this? Get over here, quick.
Yeah, that's interesting because the only image I thought of was like if you're at a party and you're holding 2 cups, you're like, oh, I got to go into the next room because I got a drink for somebody, and it's an excuse to talk to people, I suppose. I don't know. That doesn't sound like a good party strategy.
Yeah. So I think that he feels like, okay, well, if I'm talking to these people and then this other person who's not like me is talking to these people, we can communicate and then be able to like have this like a line of communication between 2 different groups of people that we will be the only people who know what's going on.
Yeah, so we'll put a pin in that to put a string through a paper cup.
I think that's the first step of making that. You put a pin
exactly. But I think we can maybe eyeball by the end of this, like who is the oppositional person that Cody may eyeball as like, that's okay, fun. This is going to be my number 1.
Okay. All right. Back to Cody.
Hopefully I don't get caught in the act, and if I do, I succeeded at my task, and it won't come back to bite me.
What's the one thing you told yourself you wouldn't do in this game?
I told myself that I'm not going to have any regrets in this game. You know, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm not going to be sorry for any of the decisions that I make. I'm not going to have any regrets. I'm going to full throttle this thing, pedal to the metal, ride a wheelie all the way across the park, and enjoy the ride.
What's the best advice you received before coming out to play?
I haven't like competed in anything of an organized sport or activity, like a real competition, with rewards for years. And coming into this, I was starting to feel some nerves. And usually when I'm nervous, it means I'm excited and I'm ready. And talking to some of my mentors, of this and family, the common thing that really resonated with me was be yourself and have fun.
Okay.
There we go. Right. That's Cody Assenmacher.
Would love to talk to Cody's mentor also.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. So maybe a bit of insight into it is I did ask him in my interview, what celebrity or fictional character would you want to come out for a loved one's visit? Always a very fun question. He said Patrick Swayze because he not only loves the movie Point Break, but quote, I have adapted the ideology that is present in that movie as part of my lifestyle.
Interesting. In what way?
I have no idea whether that means like, I don't know. I'm thinking of the new Point Break where they were like skydiving to go rob a bank or something.
I think that's in the original.
Is that in the original as well? But yeah, I mean, talk about live free to get radical, a very Johnny Utah-like philosophy, I suppose, even though he's not from Utah.
Yeah, I feel like that they also wore like dead president masks.
Yeah, maybe that's
former president masks. I think that some of them might have been living at the time of the film. Yeah.
So I do wonder what that means, right? Is Keanu Reeves one of his mentors in that regard, considering how much he loves Point Break?
I think that tracks. Yeah. Okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense. He definitely seems like the third member of Wild Stallions.
Okay. All right. So there's Cody. So, all right. That was a fun one. So good place to start. Mike, who's the next person we want to talk about?
I just want to actually quickly dote on a couple things about Cody from his bio before we move on here, because the pet peeves are always interesting.
First person back, Mike. I'm rusty.
That's all right. Listen, we're shaking the rust off. It's a new era and all that jazz. Pet peeves. Now, this is dissected a lot in the Surviving Snyder podcast, which I believe Dalton and Brendan and Rick just did an entire podcast with Tiffany Sealing, breaking down the pet peeves of each one of these contestants. But always fun to highlight. Pet peeves for Cody: lazy people, social media addicts, and clipping nails in a public location.
Okay.
It seems like the third one's a bit of a niche. I don't know how many times I've encountered
that happen. Yeah.
Maybe that's more of a Hawaii thing.
Maybe. I mean, I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen anybody clipping nails in a public place.
You know, living in
Maybe
New
I'm
York
just
City,
lucky.
I've seen it a couple times in transit, but I will say, like, I certainly have not seen it a number of times to register it as a pet peeve personally. Maybe that says more about Cody than it does about society.
Mm-hmm. But if you're
And the
doing
other
it, please stop.
Yeah, the other thing I want to peg here is why do you believe you can be the sole survivor? I know that Survivor and I were meant for each other. Just took us 20 years to realize that. My charismatic, fun loving personality will enable me to build alliances. My experiences, profession, and living in different cities have given me wisdom ahead of my time, and I will use that to my advantage in communicating with players older than me, while my active lifestyle and youthful spirit will enable me to relate to younger players. And I think that's a good point to bring up as well as we finish off talking about Cody here. He keeps bringing up, the top quartile, but I think it is interesting that he is 35 years old. He's a bit on the older side in terms of this cast. He certainly has had, 2 states worth of life experiences. And I think from the social perspective, that is going to allow him to connect, to talk about the landscape of this tribe. He does have someone older like a Nneka, and then he does have younger people like the next person we're about to speak about in Dwight that I feel like, honestly, just given Cody's general temperament, he could be able to connect and serve as the glue in between.
Yeah. He definitely has sort of the Hawaii side and the Iowa side to be able to pull from. So I definitely think that he's going to be
Hawaii in the front, Iowa in the back.
That's right. So I think he'll be somebody that's going to be very intriguing to watch here, especially at the start of the season.
Yeah, so I think maybe we can assess some of Cody's chances, to your point, once we get to know the Vesi cast more. But again, I'll sort of stake my claim in that I think Cody is going to be someone who is going to be reliable for the tribe through the pre-merge. Post-merge, he might start to step in it a bit if he starts to get a bit of that big move-itis and think like, I got to catch the big wave. I got to make sure that I start doing these things. Because we've often seen, especially in something like 42, like how much that got some of these contestants in trouble. But I think at least in the first half of the game, he's going to be looked at as such a valuable resource and such just like a big old goofball that I can't really see many reasons to target him outright.
Okay. Anything else with Cody, Mike?
No, let's move on here to our next guy on the Vesi tribe. We are talking about Dwight Moore, the Stanford student.
Okay. All right. So let's bring in Dwight. Anything you want to highlight about Dwight before we hear from him himself?
Yeah, so Dwight is 22 years old. He's a graduate student from Collierville, Tennessee. We talked about his interview experience before he even went to high school. We'll talk about that more in the interview. I will say, we've done a lot of these interviews over the years, over respective reality shows. Dwight may be the fastest talker I have ever heard in my life. I kid you not, this interview will be played at 1x speed in real time.
Maybe slow down if you're at like 1.5 or something like that, maybe.
Listen, I'll have you figure it out for yourself once you start listening to it, but like, just be warned. This is a bit of like the Micro Machines man reborn.
Okay. How old is Dwight?
Dwight is 22.
22. Okay. So I think that maybe that might be a young person thing. Okay. All right. Here is Dwight.
Why are you here on Survivor?
I'm here on Survivor because I've been watching the show since I was a little kid with my family, and this is something I've always dreamed of doing. I feel like being out here is just a representation of me and all the advice my parents have given me throughout my life. And I want to come out here and see what I'm made of. And I know that I can come out here and, win this game. I feel like all my life experiences make me very unique for a 21-year-old. And I feel like that'll carry me a long way in this game.
Mailbox. Okay.
Yep. Listen, was I wrong?
No joke.
Yeah, I'm telling you, even in his 1-minute video, like they legitimately in editing might have to slow him down to like 0.75 speed. Because otherwise it'll just be, I know we talk about like the subtitles with JT or like maybe more of the marble mouth contestants. Dwight, you might need to subtitle just because he talks so damn fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Interesting. Let's go ahead. And I think that maybe somebody who talks fast, I think that also speaks to like, okay, well, I'm just going to like make quick decisions also. Like there's not like a lot of time to like stop and like ponder what I'm doing next.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, I'll speak firsthand as someone who talks relatively quickly. I certainly do not know the ends of sentences before I start them. So I think that Dwight might have a similar attitude of like, yeah, I'll figure it out along the way. I just need to talk to sort of talk and then see how eventually I'll be able to put a period at the end of this sentence.
Okay. All right. Back to Dwight.
What's one life experience you feel has prepared you most for the game?
One life experience, I guess like a collection of life experiences, is my whole career as a journalist. So before even like I entered high school, I interviewed 3 secretaries of state, a few senators, just to name a few very influential people. And all these things kind of built up this fearlessness in me of go up and talk to anybody, get their story, get them like to share information with you. And you just go out there and put myself out there and know the worst thing that happens to me is they say no. The best thing is I had this opportunity of a lifetime. And same thing for applying a survivor. I knew my application out there, worst thing that happens, they say no. And best thing that happens is, well, I'm out here in Fiji living my dream. And I feel like with the other contestants, me having that experience of, fearlessness, going up, talking to anybody will just allow me to get information on a level that other people won't be able to do.
What's your history with watching Survivor?
So my history is watching Survivor. I first started watching Survivor Fiji when I was younger. And then I just I saw the show. I was like, oh, this has to be like a fake or whatever. Like, what are they doing? Why are they on an island? Why are they starving? And I kept watching the show and I was like, oh, this is real. This is like very challenging. And I kept watching and watching. As I got older, like I appreciated more and more for what the people are going through, what they're going out there for. And I realized, I can do this. I can go out there. And even though I'm not familiar with living outdoors, I'm not familiar with, building a shelter, making fire, foraging for food, I can go out there and learn and do it. I've overcome like many academic challenges in my life before. And I feel like, this is a different arena altogether. If I can adapt to those, I can adapt to this as well.
Give me one Survivor winner and one non-winner who you identify with the most.
Winner I identify with most, I'd say Wendell. He was very charismatic, very social player, but also extremely intelligent. And I got him with like 3 challenge wins and he built a lot of good bonds with some of the later jurors that allowed him to win the game. And I feel like if I can emulate that degree of like social ability and hopefully challenge ability, I'll take me a long way. I won't be as good as making furniture and like the shelter as he is because he's on.
Who is? Come on.
I'll learn. I'll do my best. As far as non-winner, I'll be honest, I haven't really compared myself to non-winners because I just want to focus on winning games and emulate those.
What's
Mailbox?
your
Mailbox. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, listen, talk about the
I've heard
arrogance
that
of youth.
answer before. Yeah.
I think I've heard maybe one other person say it's a little bit of like one step away, right from like, there's nobody like me on Survivor. I'm not comparing myself to contestants.
That's fine. I've never compared myself to a non-winner in any way.
I don't know. I mean, listen, Dwight.
What does he do when he's watching the season? Like nobody here is like me until they win.
Exactly.
Then we'll talk. Okay.
I only associate myself with winners. I guess that is sort of like a positive mentality to sort of, sort of like the secret almost.
Suri,
right? Of like,
I'll get back to you. Okay.
Exactly. Wait until you get that W. And then I'll put, listen, there's a W in my name for a reason. So Dwight talks about, and look, there's maybe one sticking point when he talks about, what's your history with Survivor, when he talks about how, okay, I'm not familiar with living outdoors, building a shelter, etc. You think maybe at the outset that could put him in trouble. What I will say is, look at our previous 2 Survivor winners, with no slight to either Erica or Marianne. I would say they were not necessarily the most adept for the entire survival experience. And I think much like Dwight, they have a path of possibly being on a dominant tribe, which helps insulate them early on. So then when you get to the merge, frankly, those things don't matter as much. It's not really about providing worth to the tribe. And so I do feel like when it comes to like the blueprint of a Survivor winner in the new era, if you are someone who is a bit of a fish out of water in these types of island scenarios, it might just be hope you win because all that only matters for is the pre-merge.
Yeah, I think Marianne is an interesting comparison because Marianne is another person who is a big talker. And again,
as young as well. She was, I think, 23 when she won, or 24.
Right. And I don't even know necessarily, though, if Dwight is a big Dwight, we've identified is a fast talker. I don't know if he is going to be just talking a lot like Marianne was. The thing about Marianne, who maybe didn't have a ton of experience in the wilderness, was that she had like a really positive attitude about it. And I think that goes a long way, where it's like, okay, you don't have to necessarily have a lot of experience living outside, but if you have like enthusiasm about it, I think that is a lot better than the alternative where it's like, what is this? This is gross. I don't like this.
What do you make of, and we spoke about this during the first impressions, this attitude that's been fostered in him from his interview success? And he talked a little bit more about it in his 1-minute video. He said he nearly had Jeff Kent's dream come true and get to talk with President Obama, but he wasn't able to make it happen at the last second. But still, has a lot of high-profile people. He name-checked Madeleine Albright, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice. So
we nailed it.
We really did nail it. We really were like going down the Family Feud board of secretaries of state.
But does he have a show? Where are these interviews? Is it just for fun?
I mean, this was
School projects?
Yeah, I mean, the pictures that we saw of him.
The guy's 22.
He was very young. He said this was before high school, so it had to have been at least like a decade ago, right?
Before high school. Okay.
Yeah, but I think that he said that this fosters, right, a fearlessness in him, right? The worst they can say is no. How much do you think that applies to the game of Survivor? Because I do think there's a tricky line between being proactive and like making bonds and suggesting alliances, or going the route of someone like JD from 41, where you're doing that too openly, too often. It comes across as very transparent.
Yeah, I think it really depends on who the audience is and how it is going to ultimately be received. You know, somebody could be like have a great landing spot and everybody like really appreciates him, or you know, if he's with the wrong people, they may not appreciate that as much. So, I guess you know, not to give a non-answer, but we have to see.
What an interview answer, Rob. I don't know how Dwight would feel about that. A 12-year-old
Madeline
Dwight.
Albright would give him a much better answer. Okay, all right.
What's your favorite moment in Survivor history?
Oh, that's a tough one, actually. Honestly, from Second Chances, the boat where Kimmy ended up going home via the group decision, that was just I think that was a good display of, while this game is very roulette time, also very emotional, very human, decision-based. So in that situation, of course, some people say, you know, like maybe Keith should have just gone home because no one should have, you know, broken their boat or whatever, or Kimmy should have gone home because they all came to a consensus in that degree. It was just a very like good dynamic of the game players and human emotions all coming at once and, you know, making a decision.
What excites you the most about the new era of Survivor?
What excites me the most about this new era of Survivor is I truly don't know what to expect coming out here. Like I have a bunch of ideas of what possible like new advantages or twists I could have, but I feel like it may be even wilder than I could possibly imagine. So the biggest thing for me is I want to see how I can adapt to these, how I can overcome these different challenges, and hopefully I can, you know, make it far and make it past these different obstacles I'll be throwing at us. Even though I don't know what exactly to expect, I feel like it'll, of course, be more dangerous, be more risky, and I'm willing to take it all on.
What do you think people will perceive you as?
As far as how people will perceive me on the island, I've been trying to control as much as possible before the game even started, just by what I wear, how I act, how I hold myself. Of course, I'm going to be honest with everybody that I go to Stanford University. I may not mention that I'm like a grad student. I may not mention internships that I've had, but I do plan on being honest about that because I'm only 21. I don't have the most life experience to pull from in comparison to the rest of the contestants. So I need to make that life experience that I have count and just be honest about my experience at Stanford. But I feel like they will perceive me as someone who's kind of intelligent, hopefully not like as smart as I think I am. I don't want to sound like an a-hole and be like, oh, I'm super smart. Like I'm doing pretty well for myself academically, you know. But of course, the game isn't built on like academic success, built on social success, built on strategic. So hopefully I can adapt to that as well. And I think they'll perceive me as a pretty social player, also pretty strategic. And hopefully I'm good at challenges. We'll see about that one. Because I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to be a challenge beast. Like I might be good at some. I may fail at a lot of them. We'll find out together.
What type of player are you looking for in an alliance?
The type of player I'm looking for in an alliance would be a rational player who's strategic and also has social bonds that are different than my own. I want to be able to work with someone who I can trust 100%, but at the same time has some different avenues of information than I do, so we can come together, compare notes, and make our best move forwards in the game. I mentioned rational because I want to be someone who will make good decisions, not someone who will just throw caution to the wind, do something to take a risk for the sake of taking a risk, and, you know, blow both of our games up at the same time. That would be an absolute nightmare for me. I don't want to go home because of someone else's mistake. I'd rather go home because someone else making a good game move against me instead of, oh, they just fumbled the bag and now we're both out of the game.
How eager will you be to look for advantages in the game?
Oh, I'll be like so eager to look at advantages. Like that's what you come out here to do. Especially in this new era of Survivor, you see from season 41, for example, you had Shan, Xander, and Nasir find the idols. They all made the merge, and they all made it pretty decently into the merge. 42 so far, all three idol holders, I believe, are still in the game as far as we are aware from what we've seen. Finding those advantages seems to be crucial, especially in this new era of Survivor, where every advantage so far has some kind of forced sharing of information. All the idols and the amulets and the extra votes, those had to be shared with someone in a decision or another. And knowledge is power, even though that was found like secretly sometimes. Once you use it, everyone knows that you have an advantage. So everything advantage-wise is public knowledge, but people seem to be afraid of targeting those people in this new era. So if I can find one, maybe I can instill some fear in people. They can not want to vote me out for a while and then use them to my advantage to get to people that, you know, are defying me, get them out.
mailbox.
Yeah. What do you think, Mike, about Dwight's thesis that, having the advantages is the way to go because it prevents people from targeting you?
To a certain extent, right? I mean, he does bring up factually correct information that in Survivor 41 and 42, all 6 people that found idols ended up making the merge. The ... at the end of that is like what happens afterwards, right? Where like Nasir gets targeted, Shan gets targeted, Drea gets targeted, Mike gets targeted to a certain extent by Drea because of those things, especially. And I think it's this idea of shared information, I think is good. And I'm glad that he brought that up about like why this qualifies advantages differently. The problem with that is when people know you have advantages, you might be able to have them fear you for a bit, but eventually the worm will turn in your stomach, to go back to Cody's interview, and they'll say, okay, we know you have an idol. We need to get rid of you.
Yeah, and I think this especially was driven home in the back half of season 42, where Marianne ended up with the only advantage that nobody knew about at the end of the game. Ends up like holding it up at the final tribal council. I think that Dwight's thesis is faulty, and I wonder if that will end up manifesting in the game, where if he gets an advantage, is he publicly, talking about it because he feels like, okay, having an advantage is a shield. Maybe you could say that in the case of Xander in Survivor 41, it was, but to some degree that, in talking with players like Danny, they said that like they didn't care about Xander's advantage or his idol. So it didn't matter if he held it. So it wasn't like anybody was really trying to flush it after the early part of the merge. So I think that Dwight, while his logic is sound, I think in practice that I do not subscribe to what he's saying.
I think it could work for a certain success for maybe a certain portion of the game, right? I could see him finding something and then maybe in a tribe of 6 being able to like get 1 or 2 people on his side because of that, right? Okay, you can't go for me because I have this idol now. But a 6-person tribe is very different than a 12 or 11-person tribe, where I could imagine, and again, a reason why people go out the way they do in these past couple seasons is because when you have enough numbers on your side to almost like counteract any advantages that are present, then they're just little scraps of paper that are, and little, totems that are in your bag. So the other thing about Dwight as well is just the youth aspect. I know that Marianne maybe broke the mold in many ways with her win, but like, I do feel like the track record for these contestants in their early 20s to late teens, of which Dwight is a couple this season, it's not great. Like, to your point, Xander makes it very far, but Xander was not looked at relatively as somebody that could win the game. And I wonder if Dwight is going to be looked at from a certain perspective as well, of just like not necessarily counted on as someone who has a good chance of being successful in the game. I guess successful in terms of possibly making it far, but certainly not successful in terms of getting, that $1 million paycheck.
Okay, let's go back to Dwight.
What's the one thing you told yourself you wouldn't do in this game?
Something I told myself I would not do in this game is participate in like intentional isolation or bullying of someone. That's not the kind of person I am. Even though I know this game is like built on deceit and lying, whatever, and making the best move, I don't want to be someone who like tries to isolate someone else and make their experience out here a miserable one. Like just on a human level, I just can't get down with that. That's just not who I am, and I don't plan on doing that in any way.
What's the best advice you received before coming out to play?
The best advice I received before coming out to play is just be myself. And it was a pretty simple answer, but just in life in general, people like have told me I act down to earth. I'm pretty chill, even though like I go to Stanford. Some people like, I would never guess you like go to Stanford or you're smart or whatever because you just act like a normal person. And while it sounds weird to hear, like it is a compliment to like my character. Like I don't try to hold myself above others or whatever just because the different experiences I had. So just coming out here and being myself again, like I feel like that'll take me a long way with these people, and I feel like they'll appreciate just me being a normal, like genuine human being. I know this game is all, like built on lying and everything, but at some point you want to see something familiar, someone just being their honest self. And while I do intend on lying at certain times, I'm not going to come out here and lie about every little thing possible. I want to just be myself and enjoy this experience.
Okay, there's Dwight. Mike, have you ever gotten that compliment of that, Mike, you are very smart and you are also a normal person?
Yeah, exactly. Like, wow, For being such a smart person, I didn't think you'd be so normal. A little bit of a backhanded compliment to like all the Survivor alumni who've been to Stanford, of which there has been a good variety of them. That apparently none of them are normal people.
Okay, Mike, what else did you learn about Dwight?
So let's pull a couple things from Dwight's bio. What is the accomplishment you're most proud of? In my sophomore year of high school, I decided to take the ACT just to see how I would do on it, and I ended up getting a perfect score. That was great for college admissions, and it garnered me attention locally and nationally. Due to that, I've had parents in Memphis tell me that they've used me as an example for their kids to show what Black people can accomplish academically. It's not the actual score that I'm proud of. It's the idea that hopefully someone felt motivated by seeing Black representation in an academic space. So, I mean, that's a fantastic accomplishment. And again, I think Dwight's a little bit of like his own prodigy in his own right, which could work again for or against him in this game.
Yeah. Okay. Any other interesting tidbits from Dwight's bio?
Well, we got to go to the pet peeves, of course. And there's a big one here. Dwight's main pet peeve: someone making a reference to The Office within 2 seconds of learning my name.
Oh, okay. But that's very specific. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he, even when I asked him about Celebrity Loved One, he said he wanted to be Dwight from The Office just so I can yell at him for making my namesake always relate to The Office. Big chip on his shoulder, which makes sense. Again, Dwight is 22. He hasn't really lived in a world as a functioning a human being where people have not watched The Office in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Okay. So I like this, that he hates The Office.
I mean, yeah, I guess, is he one of those people that's like, as people were coming around being like, well, actually, you know, Jim and Pam are not that great, to the credit of maybe someone that I'm on the podcast
No,
with? Like,
well, I think that he's probably a Jim fan of like, destroy him, Jim. Go further with your pranks.
Yeah, do you think Dwight gets like a call when he's like 12 years old of like, all right, little Dwight, we've got this great interview for you, Rainn Wilson from The Office. He says, no, that's my one no. I'm showing some fear here. I refuse to interview that man. I'm not going to bring him credit to a man that ruined my namesake for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I do think that Dwight is going to be interesting to watch because he's a very impressive person and has a lot of things going on. I find with the Survivor players, and maybe this is also like in the world, where that I don't know if the older players will take as kindly to somebody who, like, Marianne did a great job of like, okay, well, I'm gonna be a little bit more in the backseat. She was like, she was talking a lot and was super social, but she was fine to let some of the people who have like more life experience drive, and then ultimately waited in the background to take her shot. I don't get the sense that that's how Dwight is looking at the game.
Well, not to mention, if we're comparing to Taku, right? Like, arguably the most in danger she was in was when the two older people on that tribe were in the game, right? In the form of Jackson and Mariah. After they ended up leaving, like, the people that she was left with were sort of within that age group, within that demographic that maybe got Marianne a bit more. And Dwight does have a distinctly different attitude than Marianne. So I don't want to necessarily make a cross comparison between the two of them. Yeah, I would love to be surprised, but if Vesi ends up going to tribal council, there are a couple people I'm eyeing as a first boot. And I think there is a non-zero chance that one of them could be Dwight. For some reason, maybe it's the age thing, I keep seeing a lot of JD in him, of like this idea of a little bit of like a big fish in a small pond, like found a lot of really well-earned and like fantastically good success. But I think maybe, especially compared to other people, has not been as prepared for like the life experience and sociability that will make him feel like, okay, I know what I'm doing, maybe more so than he actually does know what he's doing.
Yeah. And I loved JD in the preseason of Survivor 41. Yeah. I thought JD was like too good to be true. And what I really liked about JD was I thought that he brought sort of like some surfer energy to sort of like the being late. And maybe this is the opposite of Cody. Maybe this is his person. But then I felt like that, okay, JD has all this stuff going on, but is able to really present as being very laid back and relaxed and chill and not somebody that you have to worry about. That turned out to not be the case.
Right. And I think Dwight certainly has, again, that attitude. Again, we just spoke about Cody, who I think is more believable with that idea of like, let me sit in the back pocket, chill out, and then make the move when I need to. I think Dwight, to his credit, is like a big go-getter. And I have a lot of difficulty seeing him not do that in that early stage of the game, right? Especially with that attitude of like, well, if I find the advantages, then I get to have the power and the information. I think that is something that could end up working out well for him with the right people, but could also, I could see, draw a lot of eyes to him. He also, though, is someone physical as well. And I think if they're looking at him as like someone that they need to help win challenges, that could be something too. But yeah. he could be something that I would imagine gets schooled as the student early on.
And I don't know, just that armchair psychologist, that if I had to guess, I think somebody who talks very fast is somebody I think who's very authentic, and somebody who's not being putting on like any sort of like a camouflage of like, okay, I'm pretending to be somebody else. Because I think that unless you are like an extremely gifted person at doing this, an actor, then I think that you are thinking about like, okay, how am I, what am I, presenting myself as opposed to somebody who's just like sort of like talking very fast and saying whatever you're thinking.
And I know that he wanted to be upfront, right, about the fact that he does go to Stanford. And again, like that authenticity is good. I know that people certainly speak about like, well, why lie about certain things in your job and your career? Because at the end of the day, right, it all sort of like comes out with the wash. But there is a bit of a stigma attached to Ivy League people. And I feel like especially in a small tribe where some people might be looking for the smallest pieces of information to glom onto as a reason to target you, it could be with Dwight. So again, like I would love to be surprised and like have Dwight be able to move in a game that's as fast paced as his pattern of speech and be able to really take the reins and like do an awesome job and show why his academic success can translate to the island. I think right now I'm not particularly seeing it, but I've been wrong before and I'd happy to be wrong here as well.
Okay. Mike, who is the third member of the Vesi tribe we're going to talk about here today?
Well, you talked before about JD, who is certainly a preseason favorite for 41. Let's talk about someone who, in my opinion, has come across as a preseason favorite even in the couple of days that the cast has been out. We're talking about Jesse Lopez, the former gang member turned political science PhD student.
Okay. I did not know that Jesse was already a person who is taking some high spots in the Survivor fantasy drafts.
Yeah, I think what it is, and we'll certainly talk about his story. I think in a cast that is full of obviously a lot of big, important stories, like Jesse certainly has one of the more remarkable ones from where he went to where he is now. And I think a lot of people understandably credit the fact that due to his background, he kind of has both sides of street smarts and book smarts, which obviously both come in handy in different regards. I think he has a really good head on his shoulders to tackle this game. We'll see your take once we listen to this interview. But yeah, from what I've been gleaning, I think Jesse is someone who has been both popular in terms of his story as well as someone who people think could legitimately do well in this game.
I'm surprised we never got that as a theme. Street smarts versus book smarts.
Well, listen, there was a NBC reality show that went with that for one season, and it was pretty bad.
Yeah, I guess they used that up. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Burnett's like, we're not going to reuse themes.
Okay. All right. Do you miss themes at all, like a year into this?
It's tough because, like, I kind of do. It's tough because, like, I think it's just a matter of, like, I don't want sort of, like, repetition, you know? Like,
themes.
I think for a while people were getting tired of the themes, and that was understandable. And now we've sort of gone into, okay, now there's no themes, and now people are starting to get tired again. I think it's honestly just like homogeny that people are tired of.
I guess no theme is better than a bad theme, but I think a good theme is better than no theme.
Yeah, I think it's tough because, like,
that's the power rankings. Good theme, no theme, bad theme.
But like David versus Goliath, there's a difference between like a theme being good for the cast and good for the season. David versus Goliath from a storytelling perspective, objectively good for the season. From the cast perspective, very bad theme, because half the cast could tell you, right? Like, hey, you're a Goliath. That means that people at home probably don't want you to win the game. Like, that's not great. Calling an entire tribe heroes, a little tough when it comes to just the outside perspective being brought in. But man, do I miss the days of just like the shit posting of making fun of Survivor themes, right? Like I even did this past season of Survivor South Africa. I came up with servers versus savers versus seals. Like I just miss the kind of odd holes that we used to cram people into. I'm grateful now that we don't need to do that, again, from like the contestants' perspective, having to view from the outside in. But, you know, we always like to keep the players and the fans themselves on their toes. And I do kind of, there's a part of my heart that kind of misses the themes as weird as they may have been.
Okay. All right, Mike, back to Jesse. Anything else you want to set up before we listen to Jesse himself?
Jesse, 30 years old, again, political science, Ph.D., living in your backyard, hopefully not literally, in Durham, North Carolina.
Okay. All right. Let's listen to Jesse.
Why are you here on Survivor?
I am here on Survivor, other than the $1 million, right? That should be everyone's, like, one of everybody's first answers. On Survivor because I am wanting to set an example for my family, set an example for my son and my daughter. Everything I do in life really is about just, you know, doing what's best for my family. And I think that, you know, to be out here, to play this game, to sort of chase this dream is what I want them to see. Is the example that I want to set for them.
What's your history with watching Survivor?
I watched Survivor when I was younger. I definitely watched, like, I remember watching Michael Scoop and Fall into the Fire for season 2. I remember sitting there watching that. I think the last season of the early seasons that I watched live was Boston Rob and Amber and All Stars and the whole proposal. That was the last season I remember watching live when I was younger. But then I ended up getting back into it because I got a PhD in political science and I, studied voting behavior for a while. And I really was interested. I wanted to find something to watch that was, related to voting, related to politics, social politics. And I was like, what is out there that I could watch and enjoy, on my downtime? And Survivor is all about that. It's all about voting, all about social politics. And so I came back around to it around, I think, Ghost Island, and I sort of just fell back in love with it and rewatched all the seasons. I've watched Australian Survivor, Survivor in New Zealand. I've listened to all the podcasts. So I'm a huge fan of the show, and I'm very excited to be out here.
Mailbox. So hi, Jesse, if you're listening. Just a quick shout out there.
Yes. If you're a political scientist, that I feel like Ghost Island would be a good season to start to watch because it's you get to see about what happens if there's a tie vote.
Exactly. Of like, okay, now I see the sort of the jury parliament decisions and how split they can be. So yeah, I think that it's interesting that Jesse gets brought in sort of through that perspective, right? And especially I think what's really going to help him is that we are in an era where like voting calculus is maybe more important than ever, considering what happened with the quote unprecedented tribal council, right? With Vati, with like everything going on with where are the votes and everything, where they, because of nuanced circumstances and certain people not having votes, like I think you really need almost a mathematician on your side to figure out, you saw this with Marianne again with that extra vote plan on Omer of like, okay, we can do the split if I use the extra vote here. I think that Jesse's particular set of skills would actually come in handy in the new era more than ever of, okay, if this person doesn't have a vote, but this person has an extra vote, like how can we manipulate the numbers to get the outcome we want?
But consider me very naive in like what political science actually is. Like that to me sounds more like being like that. I don't know. That seems again, maybe it is game theory of all that. Like I feel like that political science is a little bit like understanding like the why of politics as opposed to the actual machinations of the numbers. But again, I am not the one with a PhD in political science.
Yeah, he said he studied voting behavior, right? Which I think maybe speaks towards that why. And it's tough. I think it is a bit of a square peg into a round hole when it comes to the why, because it's like, why? Well, the why is $1 million, which is very different than I would imagine how people usually vote in terms of elections or other sort of like political affiliation. So it's not exactly a one-for-one comparison, but I do think it's interesting that this guy's like, all right, I'm studying voting. Let me find a TV show that revolves around voting. Oh yeah, Survivor. Yeah, I guess I'll start watching that again.
Yeah.
Last time he watched Rob was actually, maybe he was like, oh, that guy Rob Cesternino got voted out. I'm never watching the show again.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like Survivor All Stars would make me quit watching the show too.
Exactly. There's like, all right, Jerry got booed out of Madison Square Garden. I'm done.
Done. Okay. All right. Let's go back to Jesse.
Give me one Survivor winner and one non-winner who you identify with the most.
Okay. So for Survivor winner that I identify with the most, I'd have to go with, this is tough. I want to say Tony. I'm going to say Jeremy. I think, I'm going to break the rule. I'm going to go with Jeremy and Tony because I think that both of them were sort of motivated by their family. At least what you saw on TV was like, they seemed to be very motivated by, they were out there to play the game, and they were playing the game with their family in mind. And that is something that I want to do. And that's something that, I plan to do. For non-winner that I identify with the most, this is going to be recency bias, but I'm going to go with Shan. Because, she has a sort of history with gang affiliation, and I do as well. When I was 16, I was jumped into a gang, and, I sort of navigated my way out and ended up getting my GED and getting a Ph.D. And I believe Shan has a Ph.D. as well. So I sort of identify with Shan in that respect.
What's your
mailbox? Sorry.
I was going to say, my name's not Akiva, Rob.
Sorry about that, Mike. So interesting. I believe the first time we're getting Survivor 41 people mentioned as who were you going to play like?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And there will certainly be people that are referenced for both 41 and, spoiler alert, for 42 with this question, even though 42 had yet to finish by the time that this season had ended up starting. But I think given Jesse's background, it does make a lot of sense. And I do wonder, like, Jesse and Shan seem like completely different people, but I do wonder how much he's going to bring in a bit of that play style. Say what you want to about Shan, but like, she ruled a lot of the game up until her boot because of her sociability, because of her ability to connect with people, while also like invoking again some of those street smarts, some of the like keeping one eye over your shoulder elements that came from her background. And it seems like Jesse, I think, is able to invoke that as well. So I think the Shan is a good comparison. It's so interesting, Rob. We are now in 3 interviews in, 2 for 3, and people talking about Tony. But I think different sides of Tony. Cody talked about how much, he thought that Tony was a provider and like wanted to provide a lot of comic relief for Jesse. And he talked about this in his first answer. Like, maybe it's the Vin Diesel look about him, but it's all about family. He is here to really set an example for his family. Do you think that will at all hamper doing important things in this game when it comes to making, cutthroat decisions?
That he is doing this for his family or setting an example for his family?
Yeah, this idea of like, if I'm setting an example for my family, if I'm thinking about those people back home.
The best example is winning, Mike.
I just asked Dwight. He doesn't think that you're not setting a good example for your family if you're doing anything but winning. And I think he did credit Tony, who I think, especially in his first game, like did a lot of devious things for the sake of his family. So I think, that's a good point about how just because you're thinking about the people back home does not necessarily mean that you need to like declaw yourself because of it.
Yeah, I think within reason that I think you win the show. I don't think anybody in your family is going to be like, but why did you lie to that person?
Oh, Lil, I didn't realize you came to the family reunion.
You said you were going to set an example.
I'm just imagining Jesse being like, hey, Lil, I just came back from playing Survivor.
Did you lie?
Did you take my advice and not lose the hook?
Yeah. So
did you do the squats like I asked you to?
I think it'll be fine. And I'm obviously going back to Jeremy and Tony, that the thing that I think bonded them as friends on Survivor 40 was that they both had that relationship of like, okay, we're providers for our family and we're doing this for our family. And I think that's I think one of the reasons why Jeremy was so hurt by what Tony's ultimate betrayal, because they did have the same why.
The question is, how many days does Jesse think are in a week?
That's true. And do weekends count?
Yeah, is he invoking both Tony and Jeremy? I think I need to figure out what side he falls there.
Okay.
What's your favorite moment in Survivor history?
I think my favorite moment might be Parvati's double idol play. I think her double idol play in Heroes versus Villains was really cool. Idols are just awesome and fun to have in the game, and I would love to find one out there and be able to play it in some sort of unique way that's never been done before.
How eager will you be to look for advantages in the game?
I know everybody says like don't do, like it's so cliche now, like on the seasons, like first episodes, everybody's like, oh, your number one mistake is to go out on your own and look for an idol. I'm gonna be really tempted to go out there and look for an idol on day one, just because I mean this is such a unique opportunity. It's only once in a lifetime, and it's like kind of want to just go for it, right? So I'm gonna be extremely tempted.
What's one life experience you feel has prepared you most for the game?
I don't know if I can boil it down to a single like life experience, but I think like I mentioned, just like going from, being in this position when I was a teenager, of being in a juvenile hall, being a gang member, like having a tattoo on my face and head, thinking that the next step was going to be like prison, and having, finding a way to, take whatever opportunities I could to pivot away from that and get into a PhD program. I ended up in Berkeley. I ended up going to Duke, getting a PhD. And now I just bought my first home with my wife, and, we're living on a cul-de-sac. So I think that, I think that sort of journey that I've had, just navigating life's challenges and finding a way to make it and come out on top, I think that's prepared me for this game.
What excites you the most? Yeah, so we can meditate on that for a second. Again, we've talked about this story a couple times. What do you think, Rob, about the way Jesse pitches it to how it applies to the game? Of like, I was able to work my way out of tough situations before. That should be able to work on the island as well.
Well, I think it's a case for when we talk about people that have life experience versus people that are just coming in without as much sort of like a lived experience. How old is Jesse, by the way?
30.
Yeah. So, that start like that. I feel like that's that window of like a really good age to be playing Survivor. So like, I definitely feel like having those experiences to draw from are very helpful for Survivor players.
I think so as well, particularly again, where like just the way Jesse is phrasing it, I think works really well of like, and he is not going to be the only cast member who vocalizes this, but I think those that come in with the life experience that I think gives him a lesson of like, if you don't like your fate, your placement, change it. I think that is probably the thing that translates most to the game of Survivor, right? Where it's like, I don't like the position I'm in at this moment, rather than waiting for the 51% of outcomes for the roulette ball to land on the right space and I benefit from something. Like, let me give myself the initiative to move forward, which I think is different than like, just outwardly having that initiative to start something, more so the ability to react to the position you're in and then say, okay, how can I change that? I think that is a valuable life skill to have.
Okay. All right. Back to Jesse.
What excites you the most about the new era of Survivor?
I think it's the fact that there's just so many unknowns. Like 41 and 42 kind of blew up the whole game, right? Like everything was different. 26 days, no rice. Idols, you have to say crazy phrases and all of this randomness and just unknown aspects to the game. And we don't know going in if it's going to be like 41 or 42, or if it's going to be, they're going to revert back and maybe bring fire tokens, or maybe just go back to, any sort of earlier seasons format. I think the fact that there's just so much unknown is very exciting. We're just walking into the unknown, and I really enjoy that aspect of it.
What do you think people will perceive you as?
So I have tattoos on my arm, and I'm trying to sort of break I think my default face, like at home, is just like very like furrowed brow and just kind of like stern. But I think I've just been trying to be like more myself out here, like around people, be who I am when I'm with my wife and my kids in my comfort zone, and that's really hard, be vulnerable like that. But that's when I'm sort of like my most friendly, my most happy. So I'm going to really just try and sort of bring who I am at home with my family out to this game, to sort of break any sort of perceptions that people might have that I'm, unfriendly or, not approachable and things like that.
What type of player are you looking for in an alliance?
I think I'm looking for somebody who's dependable and who's like willing to just talk through strategy and, you know, bounce ideas off of, and who's thoughtful about it. I don't want anybody who's hard to predict in my alliance. I like people who are predictable, and I like, you know, like people who I can count on. So I'm going to look for somebody who's stable. Stable. I'll go with the word stable.
What's the one thing you told yourself you wouldn't do in this game?
Oh, what did I tell myself? I'm trying to think. Maybe what did my wife tell me not to do in this game? Let's think. Oh, what did I not want to do in this game? I guess so. I think the one thing I don't want to do in this game is if I'm lucky enough to sort of make it to final three, right? I don't want to tear down the other people's games that are in final three as well. I think that a lot of times people want to tear down other people's games and just like be a negative Nelly on the people who they're sitting with. But I think it's really important to like build the other people's games up, but also build your game up just enough so you can show that it was better than theirs. Not to be like too long-winded or anything, but like in academia, when you're writing a paper, you want to build up the straw man argument. You want to sort of have this counter argument look strong, and then you want to say, but here's why my argument is better. And so I definitely don't want to go into Final Tribal and sort of say how weak everyone else's games were and you all suck or anything like that. I want to build everyone up and just talk about why my game was strong.
What's the best advice you received before coming out to play?
Best advice I received was from my wife, who told me to just be myself and have fun.
Okay. Mike, there is Jesse. And yeah, now hearing this all through, I think a lot to like about Jesse.
Yeah, I think you could get a lot of a sense through these interviews as like, I don't know, I don't want to derive interpersonal skills assumed from just having them talk into a Zoom. But I think someone like Jesse, you know, again, on paper, you say like, yeah, he has the street smarts, he has the book smarts, but is he someone that people can get along with? But like, he seems to have a really light, I think, way to get on with things. Like he's constantly laughing throughout the interview. He does admit, as he did point out earlier, that maybe the first impression of him is that he is a little more hardened. He has a bit of that furrowed brow. He does in the picture actually that we're looking at, though that might partially be more of a sun thing than it does a personality thing. But I do think that if he has time, and again, I think that if Vesi does go on a challenge streak, he'll have enough time to be able to like show who he actually is, which does seem to be a bit of a softie. In his bio, when they talk about, you know, favorite hobbies, he says, playing chess with my son, dancing with my daughter, binge watching shows with my wife after the chess player and dancer fall asleep. And so I think that he is someone who, as he spoke about in the very first answer that he gave in the course of this interview, like very much oriented around his family, like almost a bit of a softie, despite the hard exterior. And so I do think, much like a good M&M, once you break through that candy coating, like there is a lot of sweetness inside.
Yeah, seems like a nice guy. The thing that is, and I think that like that's a nice package. I think for Survivor, where it's sort of like, okay, maybe more of like a gruff exterior, but then you get past that, and it's like, oh, actually, this person is like incredible, and like I love being around this person. So I really like that in terms of it's certainly better than the opposite. So then. The thing that, like, in trying to like combine this all together, okay, what is Jesse looking for in his allies? Predictable allies. That to me, this is somebody, he is, a serious professional. He has to, to get a PhD. I kind of wonder if maybe he's not going to gel with somebody who's like a Cody, who is, hey, I'm just here, I'm vibing, I'm here, I'm having fun, whatever happens, as long as I make 51% of my decisions be right, like I'm good. Like I feel like that Jesse, I don't see him working well with Cody.
Yeah, I mean, we have Chaos Cody and like the stability in Jesse. He literally mentions stable. That is a possible conflict point that I could imagine happening. I also wonder, to the point we made earlier about, Dwight not necessarily withholding his own educational affiliation, what do you think Jesse's going to say to his tribe members as to what he does? Because I could see him, he benefits from his image, and then I think he'd be able to like really dress down that perception and then really come maybe out at the 11th hour and be like, actually, I'm a political science PhD, but you wouldn't necessarily know that. He says in his bio that essentially he's, you don't look at me and see a scholar. As Biggie says, I'm sicker than your average. And so I do wonder, but if he finds, you know, a number 1 or a number 2 puck in that regard, like, is he going to open up necessarily about this?
I mean,
secret
Biggie
academic background?
didn't want to work with Tupac.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe if
That
they
was the
just had
problem.
talked, if they had just talked through those 2 paper cups and just hashed things out, maybe they could have seen some common ground. But I do wonder how much Jesse is going to be open about, in particular, his academic stuff, because I can imagine that's something that he keeps in his back pocket of like, yeah, I'm perceived as kind of like this, you know, easygoing, tougher guy, but secretly I know a bit more about like the way these people are operating.
Yeah. Could he tell his story and then maybe just change up his his political science that threatening? Like if he has like some other thing that he could say that his degree is in, like his college professor. I mean, everybody has to be something.
Or even just like stop his story at getting the GED, right? Which like isn't inspiring in and of itself. If I worked my way out of a one-way trip to prison and essentially reversed course and was able to get out and also get an education on top of that, I agree that I don't know if he needs to go on to be like, yes, and then I have this house with my wife and I'm studying political science. That, again, as we talked about with Dwight, might be a bit more of a red flag. As much as you talk about maybe it's not exactly the most applicable when despite the title when it comes to survivor voting. You see political science, and I think that is something that, much like if you had like a politician themselves out on the island, would be something that would raise some eyebrows.
Yeah. So we will see what Jesse ultimately tells everybody else. Mike, what else from the bio from Jesse?
So past survivors, a couple of other people that Jesse mentioned. So I will say another reason why Jesse caught some eyes is a little cocky in his bio. He said, I'm basically Spencer or Christian if they got jumped into a gang at 15. I'm definitely bringing an academic mindset to the game because I've spent more hours thinking about how people vote than Sandra and Boston Rob combined.
Okay.
So where's Jesse's statue?
He does have a PhD. That I don't know how often those two are thinking about how many people are where people are voting when they're not on Survivor. So I do think that in all of his years of studies, that I do think that that's probably accurate.
I just love the image though of Christian Hubicki like joining the Bloods at 15.
Yeah, in a gang. Yeah, that would be something.
That'd be a hell of a Survivor. What if? Also, when asked why do you believe you could be the sole survivor, he says, I've researched voting behavior for years.
Yes.
I don't care if I'm out there with someone who's never missed an episode of Survivor or someone who's played 3 times already. They ain't going to hold a candle to me strategically.
Okay. All right. This is talking a big game.
Talking a big game, which again might have been true to, someone that was mentioned before in Spencer, like might just be a bit of blowing hot air to purposely, get onto the show, make good TV. But I do think that Jesse, at least from the outset, has some interpersonal skills. I do worry a bit about the idol thing, right? He says like, I can't help myself. It's Survivor. I might start looking for idols. We just spoke about that with Dwight, how that could be possibly a bad idea. But I do think maybe unlike Dwight, he seems to have enough of that life experience and interpersonal skills to be able to, like, if he does step in it, at least try to wipe that mud off of his shoe a bit more and just say that they were, crawling under to get something like the advantage amulet.
Mm-hmm. Mike, does Jesse have any pet peeves to speak of?
Oh, yeah. We've got quitters.
Yeah.
People who complain about things but aren't willing to change.
Yeah.
And personalized license plates.
Oh, interesting.
So going back to Iowa Kramer would not like the ass man tag.
Yeah. All personalized license plates?
Apparently. I mean, look, he was in juvenile hall. Do they still make license plates there? Or is that a bit of a stereotype in terms of the prisonal system?
I'm just sorry to say, I have no idea.
Yeah,
but
it could just be like, I've made so many of those in my time.
Boy, okay. Well, I'm glad that I don't have one in case, I'm ever driving around and see Jesse.
Exactly. Like you come in contact with him, watch out. If you have especially if you have Sole Survivor on your license plate, you might take a lot of umbrage with that.
I would not. Mike, if you had a vanity license plate, what would it be?
full bloom. Like it's got to be right. Just take out some of the vowels, take out one of the L's. Like I think I'd be able to fit there.
FULBLOOM.
Maybe
Could
like
be seven.
FUL,
Is it 7 letters? Yeah.
I think, or like FULBLM, or like BLOM.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Then you start to get into mispronunciation categories. But I think there's something there. It's a sure enough phrase. What about you?
Yeah, to go back to the White Lotus, it's like, oh, wow, this guy has BLM on his license plate. Cool,
Zach,
cool guy.
Let me pull you over. I heard so many things about you.
Yeah, this guy's full BLM. Wow. Look at this guy. Yeah,
and that's how I met your mother with Jennifer Coolidge. What would yours be? Just RHAP, you think?
No, I don't know. Let me think about that. I would love to get some suggestions from the listeners of what should my vanity license plate be. But again, I'd like, how could I ever show my face to Jesse if I did that?
Or your tailpipe.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Mike. Anything else on Jesse?
No, speaking of tailpipe, let's move into the back half of the Vesi tribe here. Ironically enough, all alphabetically speaking, all the men in the front, all the women in the back, like Cody's hair, I suppose.
Okay. All right. Mike, who is the next person?
Next up is Justine Brennan. Justine is 29 years old. She works in cybersecurity sales, though in her video, she talks a bit more about like tech. She's a tech worker as well from, I believe it is Marina del Ray, California.
Okay. All right. Justine. Anything else you want to set up about Justine?
Yeah. So Justine, the main thing to take away from Justine is that she is definitely more than meets the eye. She really talks about this a lot in her 1-minute video of like, she may be perceived on the surface as someone who always has her hair done, has her nails done, but like ever since a young age, she's gone dirt biking, has gone fishing, certainly a bit of a tomboy, but she's hoping that perception will work for her as well when it comes to, you know, how she's viewed and how she'll be able to defy expectations.
All right. Let's hear from Justine.
Why are you here on Survivor?
I am here on Survivor fulfilling a childhood dream of mine. I was 7 years old when the first season came out. And I remember being a kid, that was like the one night I was able to stay up late in the week. And so my entire family would just like park it in front of our small TV in our living room. And it was kind of like a family thing for us every single week. And so it kind of has a sentimental value to it. And I just never thought it was in the realm of possibilities for me to actually like apply and then make it on Survivor. So I'm here pursuing my childhood dream that I never even thought could be a reality.
What's your history with watching Survivor?
Yeah, so I grew up watching Survivor in the early seasons. I probably watched the first 15 seasons with my family. And then I kind of lost touch with it. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to stand here and say like, oh, I'm just like a raging super fan. But I mean, I still have seen probably half the seasons. It played a big part, obviously, in my childhood. And then once the lockdown happened, you know, I kind of lost touch with it. I didn't really keep up when I was in high school and college, but then the lockdown happened and my roommate and I, her name is April. She's one of my best friends from college, but we had nothing else to do. So we actually blew up an air mattress and just put it in our living room in our apartment in LA. And we kind of had like sleepovers every night, even though we were in our early, late 20s. But it was kind of fun just like having sleepovers with your best friend again. And we would just binge watch Survivor and try to act out some of the challenges in our living room. So I kind of fell in love with it again. And I have mutual friends with Adam Klein, actually. He went to Survivor. He went to Stanford with one of my really good friends. And I remember when his season came out, she was like, oh yeah, we're having watch parties for Adam. And I was like, hold on, like normal people can go on Survivor. And that's kind of what sparked the fire.
Mailbox. You know, so now the logic is confusing here. Wait, so now normal people can go to Stanford or can they not?
I thought she said normal people can go to Survivor.
Right, but I think she's saying like, oh, Adam Klein went to Survivor, and she's like, wait, normal people can be on Survivor, but according to Dwight, if you go to Stanford, you're not perceived as being normal.
Oh, okay, yeah. Now this is going to be something that they'll have to work out. And what was wrong with the people that were on Survivor before Adam Klein?
Exactly. I love that though. It does feel like almost every season there's an Adam Klein connection. I'm trying to remember who from like the past 2 seasons I think also talked about like having Adam Klein as a friend in common. I mean, I know, listen, Adam was working in casting on other shows, but like he certainly has his finger in the Survivor pie as well.
Yes. Okay. I mean, I think that he is the survivor that launched 1,000 ships.
Apparently so. It's wild to think about. He was such a game changer in that way, to the point where he was the quote unquote normal guy that had Justine brain bust and realize, oh my God, wait, I could actually apply and be on this show.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Back to Justine.
Obviously, the pandemic happened, and it kind of encouraged me to apply and just see what happens. So that's why I'm here.
Give me one Survivor winner and one non-winner who you identify with the most.
Okay. So one Survivor winner that one that I identify with, I mean, I think the obvious one would be Erica, because I think aside from Gabby Pascuzzi, was one of the first Filipinas to be on the show. And obviously she won. So I really resonated, like her story resonated with me of how, her family moved to Canada from the Philippines, and her parents, worked their asses off to give her and her siblings everything that they could. So her story resonated with me, but also in another way, in a different way, like Parvati also kind of resonates with me. And not really the flirtatious side of her, because I'm totally that type of girl. I'm like not girl at all, but that she was able to really connect with other people in her seasons, and like even other females, like she was really able to gain their trust and just kind of be like a soundboard for them. So there are a few different winners that I identify with in different ways. And a non-winner that I identify with, I'd have to probably say Mike White. He, I thought, was just hilarious. Like, I think that, I mean, obviously I'm not out there on the beach struggling to survive yet, but I personally am a very sarcastic person. I like making witty comments. Like, I like to make people laugh and like throw out punchy one-liners. And I felt like Mike had such a dry sense of humor that was really kind of overlooked. And I really appreciated that. So I really liked him, even though he didn't win.
Mailbox.
She's a fan.
What's your favorite? She's a fan. Yes. Now the question is, Rob, like, is she gonna look at Cody and be like, I could see that guy in the White Lotus. My Mike White fandom is tingling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe. I know she didn't say that she has gone on and watched all of his other works, but yeah, that would be an interesting connection.
I mean, I for some reason, I just never thought we'd get like an outright Mike White reference as like a non-winner. But I think it all maybe also speaks to, hopefully Justine will be like a similar source of comedy as well out there.
That's a high bar.
Listen, very high bar to clear. I think that I will admit, when she talked about Parvati and resonating in the same sentence, like all I can think about is Natalie Bolton. That's all I can think about. It's just a trigger word for me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And how does her game resonate to the air mattress?
Exactly. To April at the air mattress, acting out the challenges.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Back to Justine.
What's your favorite moment in Survivor history?
I would have to say probably in one of the early seasons, I think it was Micronesia. Yeah, because that was the one that Parvati won. Probably when Natalie convinced, Eric? Yeah, Eric to give his immunity to her. And they obviously had built this all-women's alliance, the Black Widows Brigade. And she was like, that's absolutely never going to happen. I think it was, who was it? Amanda that like pitched her the idea. She was like, if you want to stay in this game, like you're obviously on the outs, like you need to convince Eric to give you his immunity, because he had just won the immunity challenge. And she was like, that's absolutely ridiculous. That's not going to happen. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And she was like, whatever, it's worth a shot. And she ended up convincing him to do that. And obviously like he got kicked out, and it's probably known as, one of the stupidest moves that anyone's ever made on Survivor. But that honestly was just such a funny and cool moment, because obviously I'm always rooting for the girls.
What's one life experience you feel has prepared you most for the game?
So I wouldn't really pin it onto one specific life experience that has happened, but my overall upbringing. So neither of my parents came from even middle-class households, I would say. Like my dad came from probably like slightly below middle class, and my mom was just like, she was poor and from the Philippines. And so when my parents met, they met at work, and they obviously got married, had 2 kids. They still didn't have anything to their names. Like they didn't have anything that was passed to them from their family. Obviously they came from lower middle class or poor families. And so I really learned the value of, if you want to accomplish something, if you want something, you're going to have to work for it. And so I think that can really apply to a bunch of different things in Survivor of like, if people are being complacent and lazy and not really helping build shelters, like if I want to sleep at night and be protected from the rain, I'm going to have to do that. And also just like me even making it on Survivor, if I want to accomplish a dream of mine, the first step is applying. And then, you'll never know, you might actually end up on Survivor, and that's what happened. So it's really that value of just like hard work that was instilled in me from my parents at a young age that I think will really help with all things here.
What excites you the most about the new era of Survivor?
What excites me the most about this new era of Survivor is just really not knowing what to expect. And like, yes, there's this new era where in seasons 41 and 42, there have been all of these new twists and turns introduced, but I would be shocked if they repeated any of those for our season, because now we're going to be specifically listening out for weird phrases that people are saying. And we know what happens on Shipwheel Island when people get sent away on like a journey. So there's a new era that has been shown in the last 2 seasons, but I think for our seasons, they're definitely going to be switching it up a bit because now we know what to expect, which is really exciting because we don't know what's going to be thrown at us. And it's really cool that now, with these seasons, there are little kids like what I once was at 7 years old watching these seasons and being like, oh, like this is Survivor. Like to them, this is Survivor. So it's really cool that, I get to be part of this new era. But for little kids out there, I probably am like the Boston Rob or the Amber or the Rudy to them. That might be giving myself too much credit, but we'll see.
Mailbox.
Yeah.
So many Survivor All-Star references today. Who would have thought?
Yeah. That boy, I hope that Justine isn't the Rudy to some little kid. Like,
yeah. Oh, what's that old lady doing out there?
Yeah. And Mike, for these kids today, it's not the new era. It's just the era.
Exactly. Because then they'll be playing. Then it'll be the new era.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's just time is relative when it comes to these things. But so let's talk about, some of the stuff that Justine had been speaking about. So, she talks about this idea of her parents really coming from humble beginnings and like instilling this idea that you have to work hard to get, exactly what you want. Obviously, hustling works really well in a game like Survivor. Justine, I think, is a little enigmatic to me. We'll get into it a little bit, actually, with her final question of like, what do you think people will perceive you as? What I think pinked for me a little bit is in her 1-minute video, she talked about how she's been an athlete her entire life. And she says, actually, the most fun I have will probably be doing the challenges. Again, she talked about doing them in her living room. So we could be looking at like a Lindsay Delashowicz type, like someone who actually could be a surprising physical presence, which I think could also help her early on in the game.
What's her athletic background? Because Lindsay was, a dietitian, but also like was very much rooted in like a physical fitness background.
Yeah, she says essentially all she says is just like, I've been an athlete my entire life, but I do think that my entire life is like, oh, I played Pee-wee I played Pee-wee basketball until I was 8 years old and then I stopped, right? It seems like this is something that she has been doing throughout, which I think definitely helps, especially in comparison to maybe some of the other people on her tribe that may not be like as physically adept. I could see if there were any reasons to like get rid of people early on, especially if they're losing challenges and have to look at like physical weakness. I do not think that would be a reason to get rid of Justine.
Okay. All right. Back to Justine.
What do you think people will perceive you as?
Oh, I don't know what people will perceive me as. I mean, I'm just going to go there. When I first found out that I got to, come on to Survivor, I got that phone call. I was like dissecting every part of my being. I was like, how do I want to act? Like, what do I want my persona to be? And then that honestly made me lose sleep at night because I was like, how do I want to be perceived? I was like really overthinking it. And I ended up coming to the decision that like, I'm just going to go on there. I'm just going to completely be myself. I mean, I'm typically pretty good at making friends. I'm pretty happy with who I am as a human. So I hope that other people that see me don't hate me. I have no idea how they're going to perceive me, but my entire, I guess, really storyline of coming onto this show is that I'm more than what meets the eye. Like, I think people see me and I usually have
like the Transformers.
my hair done, my nails done, makeup done. I'm in a cute outfit. But when it comes down to it, on the inside, I actually am kind of a tomboy. And I was raised kind of a tomboy and like a kind of no shit, like very athletic person. So I hope that, I don't know. I don't know how people are going to perceive me, but I hope it's not a negative thing.
And that is the Transformer herself, Optimus Justine.
Optimus Justine. When she says that she's gonna no S word, was that KNOW or NO S word?
I think it's NOS word, right? Of like, doesn't really take any crap from anybody. And again, she talks about her athletics. It's a little unspecified, but I think, again, the thing that she keeps touting is like almost this undercover tomboy aspect of how people might look at me and think that like, I don't want to get my hands dirty, but put me on tough as nails because I might as well be part of Dirty Hands.
Yes. Okay. And we'll see if she's ultimately part of the Savage crew.
Yeah, we shall see. So yeah, I think that Justine, I think my initial impression was just like, I wasn't entirely sure about her, much like she's not entirely sure about how she'll be perceived, that it really just could go either way. I wasn't getting like a huge taste of her, I would say, like just getting a sense of the interview. But I think putting things together, and especially again, that really physical portion that she's talking about, I could see her actually cut a pretty wide swath in this game, where there was a winner of a recent season of Survivor South Africa who was very similar, I think was perceived as a bit of like that glamour girl, certainly likes to be pampered, but like had an athletic background, was somebody who had that tough grit to her. But because of that underestimation and also social skills, was able to like get in, have a couple things break her way, and then eventually win when she needed to make her way to the end and then win fairly handily. And I think Justine has a very similar skill set in that regard.
Okay, Mike, what else do we know from her bio?
So Justine has maybe one of the most interesting accomplishments that she is most proud of.
Okay.
She says, my parents let me borrow their 20-year-old Lexus SUV a few years back, and I immediately ran the passenger side door into a 4-foot-tall concrete pole by making a sharp right turn and not seeing it in my blind spot. To fix the destroyed door would have cost more money than the car was worth, so I looked at websites of a few junkyards, found one that had a 2000 gold Lexus LX 470, bargained it down from $750 to $400, and installed the new door on Thanksgiving Day. Aside from the passenger window now being tinted, it was like the accident never happened.
Yeah. Speaking of tough as nails, was this the tough as nails challenge?
Exactly. They had a wang dang doodle trying to replace that door and finding the
She
carburetor.
replaced the door, or she had it replaced?
I mean, I'm assuming she had it replaced, so I don't know. Like, she ordered it from a junkyard. Was there like a service person that came with them to do that installation? Because otherwise,
this is very
talk
impressive.
about getting your hands
a car
dirty.
door. Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I guess that shows a lot of skills, right? Ingenuity, negotiation, lying.
Yeah.
This might be one of the most wild claims to fame that I've heard, in a bio in recent times.
Outside of the Jonas Brothers. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see if she's able to replace allies as easily as she's able to replace doors in the game of Survivor.
Okay. So, all right. That's a good story.
Here's another thing that, again, speaks towards the athleticism. What is something we would never know from looking at you? I think a lot of people think I'm an unathletic girly girl, but my dad raised me to be the son he never had. I grew up racing dirt bikes and going to fishing derbies, and at my high school's traditional junior versus senior girls powder puff football game, I put a girl in a headlock and tackled her to the ground, parentheses, there's photo evidence.
Okay, well, that's a penalty.
Well, I think, long gone are the days, right, of like physical one-on-one face-offs, especially given the three-tribe new era mentality. Otherwise, like, Justine would be in her heyday. She'd have a literal, field day out there on the football field.
Okay. All right, that's good. What about pet peeves?
Pet peeves, a little bit more on the blase-da side. When people walk slowly right in front of you, when you open the door for someone and they don't say thank you, when people are passive aggressive.
Yes. What about when you replace the door for somebody and they don't say thank you?
Exactly. Well, they shouldn't say thank you, right? That was the entire goal, was like, you don't want them to notice that they replaced the door. Here's a couple of other things that I think is interesting. Why do you believe you can be the sole survivor? So again, she has the athletic background. she does work in sales and touts her ability to have like a high EQ, right, in terms of interfacing with a lot of different types of people. She also is working in what is admitted to be a really male-centric field, that she is oftentimes one of the only women on her team, which I do find interesting comparing to like her talk about the Black Widow Brigade, right? Of like, oh yeah, I'd love to see the girls do well. I don't know.
She's always rooting for the girls. Yeah.
So we'll talk more about like obviously the other two characters. Do you
What's
think
her job though, Mike?
So she is in cybersecurity sales.
Okay, got it.
Do you think she is someone who, I guess knowing what we know of the guy so far, that like could fit in here? I could see like maybe a possible partnership between her and a Cody or her and a Jesse.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. I mean, it could go. Again, I'm like, I don't want to be like Fencerton, but I mean, like with these, we're talking about human beings. So, you know, for whatever reason, like Jesse could like, get the wrong vibe from her and not want to work with her, or vice versa.
Yeah, I would say of the two, I could see her vibing with Cody more. Again, she grew up like racing dirt bikes and fishing. Cody said in his bio that like his bottom teeth are fake because his brother and him were doing some dingbat stuff and he knocked out a bunch of his front teeth on an ATV. So like, I think they do vibe a bit similar in terms of that kind of like daredevil, get dirty mentality. And again, if Cody's talking about working with opposites, the way that Justine comes across is very oppositional to that. And so I think maybe I'm circling the drain as to like her being the number one that he is seeking out right now. She also says, which past survivor will you play the game most like? Either Kelly Wentworth or Joe Anglim. Joe was obviously an insane competitor at the individual challenges, but he also proved himself to be a necessary part of the tribe with how resourceful he was. Both were generally likable people to their tribes. It's necessary to perform things like blindsides in order to keep yourself in the game, but I think Kelly and Joe both played in a lawful enough way that wasn't anywhere near as manipulative as other people like Sandra or Tony. Yeah, maybe lawful in order when it comes to some of Joe's beliefs.
Yeah, in the game. Yeah. All right. So I don't know. The cybersecurity background is interesting to me because I feel like that when we're talking about her, the rest of her, I do feel like that maybe she's like feeling like a little bit more like no collar. But then cybersecurity, I feel like is like I think I feel like that gives off like very like discipline.
Right, but I think sales might be the most like no collar of the white collar positions, right? Because again, it's very interpersonal. It's very much meeting someone on their level and maybe getting a bit more unorthodox with things. Justine also has a psychology degree as well, which look, sometimes a degree is just a piece of paper on the wall, but like she has at least some sort of understanding of human behavior from an academic perspective. So the more I got to know about Justine, the more I like really
there's more than meets the eye.
Exactly. Now we just need like the allspark to pop up in Justine's chest as she goes into beast mode in these challenges. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I was a little bit sort of like arrow pointing sideways, but I think I'm going to ultimately walk away from this as the arrow more pointing up for Justine. All right, Mike, who is next?
Well, you talk about the arrow pointing up, but let's have the arrow point west, as that is the journey that Nneka Ejere made 16 years ago when the pharmacist immigrated from Nigeria to America to eventually end up playing Survivor years later.
Okay. All right. So what else do you want to set up about Nneka?
Nneka is 43 years old, and she is from Weatherford, Texas. So yeah, Nneka's going to get into a bit of her own backstory, how she got into the show. She is a bit of a late convert, but as we say, better late than never when it comes to getting into Survivor.
That's right. That's right. Okay. All right. Are we ready to hit play on Nneka?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Why are you here on Survivor?
I'm here on Survivor because it's literally a bucket list item and a dream come true. But it was as a result of getting all into the show during the lockdown period and becoming an acute super fan of the show. And when auditions opened, I sent in a video, and it was more to not just, convince myself that I can do the hard things, but to be able to put myself in a place where it feels like everything's out of my control. and to see how well I thrive.
What's your history with watching Survivor?
So we started watching Survivor during the lockdown. My daughter started on the show and got the whole family into it. So it became a thing that really bonded us during the lockdown period, because we will sit and watch episodes and seasons upon seasons. And my whole family ended up becoming super fans of the show. And here we are.
Give me one Survivor winner and one non-winner who you identify with the most.
Yeah, actually, the two people, Survivor players that I identify with the most, one is a winner and one is a non-winner. The winner is Denise, and I identify her with, the most because of how she's able to stay calm and build trust and, deep trusted relationships, and that got her to the end. And then the other not Survivor player that was a non-winner, Suri, just with how she just plays an excellent social game and build strong relationships. Like, she's playing and it doesn't even seem like she's playing, but she is. So I do resonate very strongly with those two and look forward to combining both qualities in my game.
What's your favorite moment in Survivor history?
I mean, I don't know. I think they're very close. Even up until the last season, season 41, just watching that, seconds apart fire challenge between Heather and Deshaun. That had all of us just standing and screaming at the TV until it happened. So it's just, there are so many moments like that, but those ones that just get your adrenaline flowing and you can't you want to be in there, and live it out. So I don't know. I have a ton of favorite moments, but I think that would be one of the more recent ones.
Mailbag. Pox. Yeah. Wow. First off, was not expecting a Deshaun versus Heather at the Final Four. But Mike, to my knowledge, is that the first time we've heard anybody cite a Final Four fire making as their favorite Survivor moment?
I'm trying to remember to look back. Maybe I'll do a quick control F on our 41 and 42 interviews. Maybe they mention I don't know, the first one between, Ben and Devin, or maybe the emotionality of Sarah versus Tony. But yeah, I mean, this was like music to Jeff Probst's ears, right? Of okay, as long as if there's one person
it's working.
If 99 people in the room don't like your fire making challenge, but one person does, that means you want to keep doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else that you want to say about this?
No, I mean, we should talk about maybe the Survivor players she associates with. She talks about Suri in her bio as well. Denise, I think, is going to be a really interesting comparison, in particular when it comes to the things she mentioned about Denise. Because to spoil a bit about later on in the interview, Nneka is not big on lying. She says in her 1-minute video she is actually a bad liar, and she's not very good at cheating. And I think what she was able to pull from Denise's game, right? This idea of she was able to build these trusted relationships. She was able to stay calm under pressure. It's interesting that she was pulling those facets of those game, but then also really loving Suri so much when Suri, listen, has a killer smile and a giggle, but did some of the most ruthless stuff in the game's history.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, you could pick which things you like. Maybe she likes her giggle.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, Nneka likes to laugh as well. And she says, I think she says in her 1-minute video, her smile is a large part of who she is. So yeah, she might just see, the pearly whites on Suri.
She's fun.
That's my player.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, Mike, Suri was a member of the Heroes tribe.
Right, true. I think maybe she looked at the phrase gangster in an Oprah suit and she just listened to the word Oprah suit and was like, okay, that's my player. Forget about the gangster stuff. What's one life experience you feel has prepared you most for the game?
I would say life experience, because I think my whole life experience, more like life values. Experience-wise, I have a pretty interesting background, born and raised in Nigeria and then moved to the States. With 2 toddlers, I'm pregnant for the third one, with my husband then. And it's been an accumulation of experiences, but I would think that the values that have kept me going, which is just, very high sense of resilience, never settling for less than excellent, and also understanding the value of community and relationships. I think those will take me far in this game. And then, even though the game is one where, people very easily resort to, lying and cheating and backstabbing, but, I see myself challenging how that is played and going with the opposite of that, and we'll see how that works out.
What excites you? Yeah, so listen, cue the red flag emojis. Let's talk about this. As I just mentioned, Nneka says, even though the game is one where people very easily resort to lying and cheating and backstabbing, I see myself challenging how that is played and going with the opposite of that. I'm here to say that is not a death sentence. Like, I don't know if that will necessarily make her a de facto first one out automatically. I do not know, though, if that is necessarily something that could get her the win.
It would be a new way to play the game, for sure.
Yeah, and it's but it's almost like setting limits for yourself, right? Like purposely handcuffing yourself and being like, oh, well, I was able to succeed in spite of this. Like, why? And I will also say that, like, I don't think like lying, cheating, and backstabbing is like, well, the best liars always end up winning the game. That certainly is not the case. We have certainly seen people play very duplicitous games and win, but the vast majority of the time, it's someone who like did lie, but I think for the most part came across as very authentic. The key part of that sentence being they did lie. And so I just don't know if Nneka having this idea coming in of like, I don't want to do this, if that's the correct headspace to have.
Right. And just because that she's saying this in her preseason interview does not mean that this is how she is automatically going to play the game when push comes to shove. Like, you might get out there and be like, oh, okay, well, I do need to omit this information.
Well, I think especially like if she finds herself in an interesting position in this small tribe, right? She is the oldest woman in the season, is the oldest person on the tribe. If she finds herself a bit of a social outcast early on, maybe she finds that she has to be a little more tricky, a little bit more devious to be able to make her way through that first vote. Because otherwise, look, honesty is good to have in an ally. And so I could see a universe where like people look at her as, maybe to that Jesse point, someone who is reliable and stable. At the same time, if, for example, someone like can't trust you with a secret,
right,
or you're able to like, or you leak a plan to somebody else because you can't lie to them that it's not them, that's when you become a bit more of a liability than an asset.
Yeah, and somebody else that was like this in the new era was Jeannie. And Shan ultimately like felt like, okay, Ricard is a snake, but Jeannie, I don't trust that she's not going to give away all the information.
Right. Do I want a snake or do I want a pet rock? Like, yes, the snake could bite me, but like the snake is something good to have on my side at the end of the day.
Okay. Back to Nneka.
What excites you the most about the new era of Survivor?
What excites me the most will be, just how one is it's continued to evolve. The show has not become redundant at all. And I think that's cool. That makes you stay glued and interested, especially in this era where people have attention spans of a gnat, So the fact that Survivor has continued to evolve and kind of like continue to reinvent itself is awesome. And because it's a social game that we're actually taking what's going on socially or in the culture and reflecting it in the game and opening up discourse for that, I think that's important. And glad that that's become a part of the game. And then, how it's also tried to, especially the last couple of seasons, involve younger players, like the game within the game, all of that, because those are fans that are being groomed, for the future. It kind of makes me think of how my 7-year-old niece is already a fan of Survivor and dreams of being on Survivor when she grows up. So it's exciting.
What do you think people will perceive you as?
I think the initial perception will be, because I smile a lot, like, hey, she's all fun and games, without understanding that behind the smile and laughter, there's a lot of observing and learning, and I stay very curious, behind that. So I think it will be just the initial hey, she's all fun and games. And then, knowing that I'm also one of the older players this season, kind of underestimating how strong I might be and how I might show up in challenges. So we'll see how that plays out.
What type of player are you looking for in an alliance?
I would say members, because you always need more than one.
That's a good point.
I'm
very valid.
I'll be looking for, because I'm one who builds trust, to build deep relationships. And, I see the relationships built on Survivor going past, beyond the game, So yes, I'll be looking to build some deep trusted relationships with a person or persons that, while I understand the game is dynamic and people change, there will be a stronger foundation that will be able to take us to the end.
Okay. So, yeah, that's interesting because Nneka says like, okay, well, people are going to see me and see my smile and they're going to think I'm all fun and games, but what? I don't know what's going to happen after that.
Well, because she follows it up, right, by being like, but I'm just observing and learning. And it's like,
yeah,
great. What are you going to do with that information?
Yeah. So I guess then just talk about it with people.
And again, and I'm not saying that, she's not going to be dead in the water. I don't think she'll be a pain in the Nneka, if you will, to anybody that early on. But to your point about Jeannie, right? Like if Ua doesn't lose that last immunity challenge, like Jeannie ends up making it to the merge, it's not like she becomes an automatic first boot, especially in these smaller tribes. It might be more so the people that are like sticking their necks out and being maybe a bit too dicey, a bit too duplicitous. But for Nneka, I'm just not seeing maybe like the necessary duplicity that it takes to win the game. Now, again, she could completely come in and like end up either purposely or accidentally like cutting throats and betraying people just because she realizes that's what the nature of the game is. But at least with the mindset that she's coming into the game with, I don't know if she is like as up to bat for the pitches that are being thrown her way as the four people we talked about before her.
Yeah, Nneka is an interesting one here. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes, and exactly. She said that she's going to be able to hold her own in the challenges and see if that's something that she's able to bring to the table. But I feel like I don't have a lot to really, that gives me a lot of faith that Nneka is somebody who's going to be a winner of the season.
I think she will be a bit of a workhorse at camp. The three words to describe herself from her bio: joyful, hardworking, trustworthy. Her two pet peeves: mediocrity and laziness. So maybe if there's somebody that can endear her to the other people on Vesi, it might be like she is someone who is constantly working her butt off at camp. And so they feel like, especially again, when camp life is so necessary in the early stages, that they're like, yeah, we could keep her around. Plus, she's a little toothless, and that we know that she's going to be honest and upfront to us, that she's not the big threat we need to take care of right here, right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe she's somebody who is sort of like somebody who's like more of like a leader of the tribe, where we're talking about like these people are they're like going in their own like different directions. Like maybe she could be the person that, keeps this group like Vesi strong. And then ultimately like that could be like what her superpower is in the game.
Do you expect her and Jesse to be like the mom and pop of the tribe? Because I also could see them bonding as well. They're the only two parents on the tribe. Jesse, again, is looking for that stability. Nneka is perhaps like begrudgingly stable to her detriment. And so I think this could be a possible person he would want to have on his side.
Well, it's interesting because Jesse, you said Jesse's 30, right? But Cody's 35.
Yeah.
So, but he fits in more. He's like at the kids' table more than he's like the grown up.
Yeah, he's more so like the Disney Channel kid, or like the Melrose Place, right? Like the 35 playing 30, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Nneka and Cody ultimately, that you feel like that there are some things that they probably are like simpatico about, but who knows? Is he going to be like is he a hard worker around the camp? I feel like that's a interesting question.
Right, because we know that like Brad and Jeannie really bonded over being, hard workers, put your nose down, and just kind of push your way forward. And actually, that was a very similar relationship, right? Where like Brad was a little more chaotic and he was running around and sneaking off into the bushes to spy on people, whereas Jeannie was a bit more of like a stable force. could be a very similar dynamic with Cody and Nneka, or it could be more so of like a, oil and water. Yeah, these two were working towards like the same cause. Like I mentioned before, Cody came from this environment of like handshake, loyalty, you're a man of your word, which Nneka is sort of like putting forward as how she wants to play the game. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't translate when it comes to being in the game of Survivor together.
Okay. Mike, what else did you get from Nneka's bio?
I'm looking right here. Who is her hero and why? My dad, he has accomplished so much. He overcame so many obstacles from childhood through his adult years and not only thrived, but brought so many others along with him to ensure he ended the cycle of poverty that would have plagued the extended family otherwise. And Justine mentions the cycle of poverty herself in what happened in Micronesia.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then any fun pet peeves from Nneka?
No, the only two were mediocrity and laziness. I do like mediocrity as a pet peeve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's mid. I hate it.
Mm-hmm. Mediocrity is mid?
Isn't it quite literally like what mid means? It's mediocre?
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then we have one last person that we're going to talk about here today. Tell me about the sixth member of the Vesi tribe.
I would say probably the biggest name of the season, just from like an objective perspective, is Noelle Lambert. Noelle is 25. She is from Manchester, New Hampshire. Noelle's story is that she was recruited to play D1 lacrosse, was a star athlete in her own right. And then 6 years ago, got into a moped accident that caused the amputation of her left leg. But she freaking picked herself back up and kept on running, quite literally. As she went into pivot sports, she became a track star and ended up representing the United States at last year's Paralympic Games in Tokyo, where she ended up, I believe, I think it's set a new American record in Tokyo for the 100-meter dash in her classification group. So like foot race, forget about it. If we're starting the way we did with 42 of like the Daniel, the Daniel Memorial Challenge of run out and go grab something in the middle of the jungle, like Noelle's going to smoke these fools. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm interested to hear what Noelle sounds like. And anything else you want to set up?
No, I mean, we'll talk about Noelle. I do not think is necessarily someone who was just recruited by name alone. As she's actually going to get into in the very beginning of her interview, she is a big fan of the show as well. So that I think that also helps lend some credence to her doing well in the game.
Okay.
Why are you here on Survivor?
I think a big reason why I'm here on Survivor is, one of the obvious reasons. I'm a huge fan of the show. I basically grew up watching it because my mom is a diehard fan as well. But another big reason is I'm here on behalf of the whole amputee community and the disability community. And I want to prove to people that people who have disabilities, they're not incapable of doing things. And I am the first above knee amputee to ever play the game of Survivor. So having that title is incredibly special to me because I'm not only playing for myself, but I'm also playing for them to prove to them that they can do anything that they put their minds to.
What's your history with watching Survivor?
Yeah, so growing up, I think I was about like maybe 10 or 11. And, my mom's watching every single season. She's been a diehard fan from the first season it ever aired. And like the do's and don'ts of Survivor, she always knows. And I remember I was just a young kid saying, I don't want to watch Survivor. I want to watch like cartoons or something else. And then she literally sat me down and I started watching it with her. And I just fell in love with it. And it was like me and her, it was like our thing. We just had Survivor Wednesday nights. And just to see the game like evolve and change, and every single season you have no idea what Jeff and the producers are going to throw you. It just makes it that much more exciting. And just to finally be a part of it is pretty insane to say.
Mailbox. Mike, are you letting Asher watch cartoons, or are you forcing him to watch Survivor yet?
I haven't foisted it upon him quite yet, just because I think there'd be more explanations required. I'd much rather be like, why don't you watch Bluey before we have to get into, the complicated social dynamics that come across in Survivor, especially early on as well, right? It's not all about chasing chickens. Some of those early seasons of Survivor had some very, I'd say, age inappropriate stuff for 10 and 11-year-olds.
Yeah. I would try to force my kids to watch Survivor, but they're like, oh, we don't want to watch this. Why is Dad making us watch this? We don't want to watch it.
Well, that's the thing as well, is that for you, it's a little bit of like bring a horse to water, right? Of like, you have a direct affiliation with the show in more ways than one.
Yeah.
I guess it's a little bit more degrees of separation that like Noelle's mom, at least from what I would imagine, unless this is a random surprise, that there is a little bit of a claim to fame, again, making reference to that show. Unless like her mom is just a big fan of Survivor. So at least it's not a thing of like, but you do this for your job. This isn't bring your kid to work day. Me one Survivor winner and one non-winner who you identify with the most.
I would have to say, the biggest, my favorite player that has ever won the game has to be Boston Rob, because you know what? I'm from the Boston area. I'm from New Hampshire, and having like the name Boston Rob and always wearing the baseball cap, like that was so cool. And how he played the game is always something that I always admired and I always loved. And then someone who hasn't won that I continue to love and always watch. I watched her previous season on how she played is Kelly Wentworth. I mean, she basically has checked every single box other than winning the game. And I feel like she was a big part of how it's evolved with, females winning, finding idols, and how she was able to use it and kind of backstab people along the way. Like that was just amazing to see. And it just really made me fall in love with Survivor even more.
What's your favorite moment in Survivor history?
I had to rewatch all these seasons. I found out I was coming on. I was just, I had to prepare myself. I had to remember. And I was back watching Winners at War. And, my favorite moment was when everyone who was on edge of extinction, it was during the family visit. And, they probably thought in their heads, I'm not going to get family visit. I got voted off. And then I remember the boat coming around. And then you see Natalie scream, "Oh my God, it's our families," and everyone rushing towards the boat. I mean, that literally brought me to tears. And that's like one of the things that I always think back to. And, like one of my favorite parts is the family visit to watch, and love being able to cry and watch with people you have no idea who they actually are. And you're just watching it on a TV screen. I mean, to kind of connect like that is definitely incredible, but definitely that moment of all of them rushing towards the boat. And it wasn't even just one family member, it was their entire family. So that was just something that was really special to me.
What's one life experience? Yeah, so definitely, I mean, unlike the Gnarly Foods Challenge or the Fire Making Challenge, definitely not the first time we have heard someone say the family visits is their favorite. But yeah, maybe, I don't know, I would imagine this continues to not be the case. Some bad news for Noelle, and particularly her mom, about family visits when it comes to making that happen on Survivor 43.
Yes. Unlikely. But the thing that I thought, this is like really weird that it has been constantly marketed almost as much as the Lending Tree commercials on Big Brother, where
talk about another White Lotus connection in Molly Shannon.
Yeah. That we see a ton of commercials, and it's like all about promoting the family visit. But I can't imagine that they're going to have family visits. Like, I think they're trying to say like Survivor is family, and it's like you watch it with your family and the survivors get family, but it's very confusing because it seems like it's a commercial just for the family visit, which we do not believe will be a part of Survivor 43.
Yeah, we have Boston Rob, the aforementioned, with his cool baseball cap.
When you come on Survivor, your family.
Yeah, well, it's like Survivor. It's all about the social connections, and then it leads to family, which is odd. Also considering, again, going back to All Stars, like the way Boston Rob maybe didn't utilize those social connections in a very
But
nice
that's how
way.
I got a family, Mike. Don't forget it.
Remember, hoes before bros. CBS cares.
But it's not the takeaway. It's not the takeaway.
Yeah, so I do agree, though. Like, I had sort of surmised that, okay, they wanted to advertise Survivor, but they didn't release the cast until this week. So like they couldn't actually show anything up until this point. So they just had to like re-air this footage. But yeah, I mean, maybe one of the reasons why, maybe did Noelle possibly manifest a future commercial of like, oh yeah, you know what? That is a good moment. Let's focus all of our marketing.
I love the family visit. I love Boston Rob. Can you do anything for me, Survivor?
Exactly. Oh, well, let's talk about this one time where literally everyone in their extended family got out there onto the island. Yeah, again, a little odd in the face of, again, assuming we're not going to get a family visit, both because of COVID protocols and because of the shortened season. But good to know that, you know, Noelle is someone who has her heart in the right place. Though, again, I think the Kelly Wentworth comparison, I think, is really interesting, particularly the Cambodia Kelly Wentworth is what she's referencing. She does it in her bio as well. She really admires, like, the tenacity, but again, maybe also like the surprising cutthroatness. I think you look at Noelle and you're just like, yeah, Paralympic athlete, there to compete in challenges, maybe play more of an honorific game. But Noelle is here to play, I think. And I think that's something that could possibly surprise people both on and off the island.
Okay, back to Noelle.
What's one life experience you feel has prepared you most for the game?
One life experience that has definitely, I feel like, has prepared me for the game is losing my left leg. Just the physical and mental toughness that I've had to go through these last 6 years and basically, learn how to do everything all over again. I mean, it did prepare me a little bit for this moment just because I know that this game is going to be probably the toughest mental and physical challenge that I've ever done in my entire life. So kind of having to go through something like that, I mean, it has only prepared me for a little bit. I mean, I can tell you that I am fully anticipating the game of Survivor being a lot harder than losing my leg because, I'm out here and I'm by myself. I don't have the support system that I have back home. I don't have the people back home that got me through my amputation and got me through my accident. And so it's definitely, that's going to be the biggest and toughest challenge for me is, can I do this on my own? Can I actually get through things by myself? Because I've never actually had to experience it before in my entire life.
What excites you the most about the new era of Survivor?
I think what excites me the most about this new era of Survivor is just based on the fact that you really have no idea what they're going to throw at you, what Jeff's going to throw at you. And, it's a scared and excited feeling because everybody else you're playing with is probably feeling the exact same way. There's no way that you can physically and mentally prepare yourself for the game of Survivor because you really just don't know what the season is going to entail and what changes they're going to make. And so the game plan that you have coming in, it might not be the game plan that you have moving forward. So I think what excites me the most is definitely just getting there and just realizing, I'm not the only one that has no idea what's going to happen. Everybody else is doing it. So I'm not alone in this, but it makes the game that much more exciting to watch. And, everybody has their unique story. And so I'm just excited to get to actually meet everybody and connect with them and hear everything that everyone's gone through.
What type of player are you looking for in an alliance?
I think the type of player that I'm looking for in Alliance in the beginning is definitely somebody who's a really big physical threat because I feel like if I connect with them, usually the physical threats that are really good in challenges, typically they stick around until the merge or until right before the merge because they know that they have to be a part of the tribe so that you can actually win and you don't have to vote somebody off. So me personally kind of befriending and connecting with someone who's really big and who's really a big physical threat and really good in challenges, I think is really smart and strategic because they can help me get further in the game. And I'm just kind of looking to lay low as much as possible until it is time where I have to make the big moves. I have to do the cutthroat decisions and, I'm excited for it.
Mailbox. Yeah.
Yeah. So look at Noelle, meat shield strategy going into the game here.
Which I like the thought. However, I don't know if that person's on her tribe.
Maybe Cody. It's tough because he's not exactly the Jonathan Young of the group, but I do think if it comes to, if she is looking to say, even just looking outside of the physical perspective, I want to align myself with people who have a good chance of being kept around for being necessary for the tribe, then I think that's Cody, right? If that's someone that we're assuming that he's going to be this provider and this sort of survival expert for the tribe, then I think she could look at him, even though she probably is more physically adept for these challenges. You could also say if Justine does indeed come out and prove herself, then maybe she'll put her in a headlock in terms of a final 3 deal.
Oh, interesting. I'm just thinking Noelle might be the biggest physical competitor on this tribe.
Exactly. My biggest alliance is to myself, the biggest physical threat on this tribe.
Yeah. So, the people might be looking at her as a meat shield.
I could certainly see it to a certain extent, especially if she does open up about her background, right? If she calls herself a U.S. Paralympian, then I think there's, again, a lot of attachment to that's assumed with athletics. And even though, Noelle I mean, hell, her lower body support is going to be strong AF, but who knows about anything else that she's doing? I do think there is this perception of just strength to her that might cause people to want to join up with her as well. But yeah, I certainly racked my brain when she came up with this of like, okay, who does she want to work with? Cody is really the only one I could think of right up. I mean, I know Dwight was talking about like, and he certainly has the build for it, at least from what we see of someone who thinks he could do well in the challenges. But I think it's a really interesting perspective to have, especially as a fellow athlete, right? Of like, let me surround myself with other people, not just because it'll make me less of a target, but because I know that these are guaranteed people pretty much to stay around. And so I want to get in their good graces.
Okay. All right. Let's hear the rest of what Noelle has to say.
How eager will you be to look for advantages in the game?
I mean, I want to say the second I get to the beach, I want to be like on the lookout, but that makes you a threat off the beginning. So I just have to, I have to contain myself. I have to know, I just have to continue to tell myself, you don't want to get voted off first. You don't, because you're just out looking for an idol. But at the same time, that's part of the game. And, being a woman and finding an idol or an advantage, that just makes it even more special. So I'm going to do everything I can possible to try to find an idol or find an advantage, but I'm going to do it, I hope, in the sneakiest way possible. Not in the camera's eyes, but in my tribe mates' eyes, so they don't actually know that I'm looking for something.
What's the one thing you told yourself you wouldn't do in this game?
I think one thing I told myself that I will never do in this game is, use my disability as an excuse or a reason not to do something. And I've never done that in the past. I've always used my amputation as a reason why I should do something. So just kind of breaking through that barrier of saying, I can do this. I can do this challenge just like everybody else can. And just kind of having that confidence. But the biggest thing I never want to do is say, I don't think I can do this challenge because of the fact that I am an amputee. I want to have the confidence in myself, and I want to prove myself to my tribe mates that I'm just as capable in myself as I'm just as capable as they are to do the challenge.
Okay. There is Noelle.
Yep. Words to live by there.
Yes.
So yeah, I think Noelle is in a really interesting position here. As we pointed out, I think she is maybe the most adept for these challenges, both from a competitive level as well as an athletic level, which I think will get her early on to, the tribe. But maybe she just planted this idea in my head, Rob, but I'm seeing a lot of similarities between her and Kelly Wentworth.
Yeah. Well, I was to add to that, much like Kelly Wentworth in her last time out, had a very close ally in the tribe in Lauren. Like, I really feel like Noelle and Justine are going to get along.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, I'm really seeing, again, going back to what Justine was saying about like always rooting for the girls. I think she's going to find a kindred spirit in Noelle. Maybe they rope in like a Cody as well as a third, maybe even a Nneka as a fourth, assuming that like the two of them end up getting along there. But I think Noelle's in a good spot here, because I also think it's not exactly, with no offense to Kelly Bruno, the previous amputee to appear on Survivor, who was a little bit out of her element, I think, from just like a social perspective. It does seem like Noelle she knows the game.
Yeah, we don't talk about Kelly.
Yeah, exactly. We know that we don't talk about Bruno Noelle, if you will. I think that
we do talk about her.
She has like an ability to see what is necessary for the game. Again, she's talking about like, I want to start looking for idols. I know I want to keep these physical people around until I have to make the cutthroat moves, which again is not typical when we have athletes on Survivor. Maybe it's just that low bar to talk about another Olympic event that we possibly see from bringing some of these people on. But like, I like where Noelle's head is at. Now, look. Yeah. I'd be remiss if I did not bring this up, because again, this was also part of the journey of Kelly Bruno. I think Noelle is able to ingratiate herself well. When it comes to her chances of winning, how much is this idea of her story going to be at the front of the minds of her competition, in your opinion?
I think it's going to be, top of mind. Nneka was, very much, was very quick to say it. Like, I can't let Kelly Bruno get to the end because people will give her the money automatically. And so I think that definitely will be something that's on somebody's concern. But I think that you worry about that later.
definitely worry about that later. And I think she's yet another person that we've been talking about in Vesi, right? Of like, they'll be good in the pre-merge, and then post-merge, that stomach worm might turn. And it's sad because that might be the case here for Noelle, right? Just due to what she had to go through, completely external circumstances, that is the reason why they all of a sudden clip her. I imagine if and when they do, it's going to be really tough, but I feel like it has to be discussed if we're talking about her winner odds, because that's another example of like the story just being so prominently out there. Now, also all that being said, a story does not necessarily make for a slam dunk victory in the game of Survivor. Again, compare it to somebody like Mike Turner, who, again, had this really great story of just like where he came from, the family that he was raising, but didn't necessarily have that story on the island to back up the story off island. If Noelle does make it to the final three, she has an incredible story off island and a bit of on island as to like what she had to work through physically to get to this point. But if the story she also created on island is not up to snuff, I would not exactly call it a lock-in victory that might make people assume they have to take her out.
Okay. All right, Mike, what else do you have about Noelle?
Let's look into her bio here. So, pet peeves: lazy people, slow drivers, and phony people. Uh-oh. Like the paper cup phony people?
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, other than that, it's just a lot about like her athletic achievements, her story, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that is our Vesi tribe, Rob. I want to finish here with something we did in 42 that I think would be a fun exercise to do to sort of simulate what might play out on the beach. First off, who do you think out of these 6 will be the first boot from this tribe should they go to tribal council pre-merge?
I feel like it is going to be, and I think this might be surprising, I think it will be Cody.
Oh, wow. Yeah. A bit surprising from my perspective. I am going to say I'm between Dwight and Nneka. I think right now I will say Dwight. I think he won't be able to. Yeah, I don't think he'll be able to rein it in, but I think Cody's a really interesting thing as well of like not being able to rein it in, and also a cautionary tale.
Dwight will be my second choice, but I think it's going to be Cody.
All right. Then the other one, we talked about this a bit. Who do you think will be the biggest power couple in this tribe? Who's going to be the gruesome twosome?
Well, I think it's going to be Noelle and Justine. And I kind of feel like that they are sort of like the power in the tribe. And I think that they basically like everything is going to run through them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that one. I would say maybe another one I might think of would be Justine and Cody, but I think the helpful center of that Venn diagram is Justine. And again, how she might, under the radar, again, unexpected to her point about her perception, be like the most well set up person in this tribe just due to the makeup.
Yeah. Like I feel like at the core of the tribe, like I feel like that I see it being like people who want to do like work and like really like do the work around camp and try to like have like a really good like structure set up. And I feel like that Cody is the one I could see him like sort of like being off and like doing his own thing that doesn't really gel with the rest of the group. And then Dwight, I'm not sure necessarily if that's his thing in terms of being a part of like the, I just see like as a young person, like I feel like that I could see him like also marching to the beat of his own drummer.
Also put in a shout out for Jesse and Nneka. I think, again, there's a lot of commonality between the two of them that I could see them working together. But if Nneka ends up getting cut early, I could see Jesse also, true to his background, being able to pivot and just like immediately get in. It's not like, again, another Brad and Jeannie situation of like, oh no, my closest ally got cut. Now I'm just sort of unmoored, drifting in the ocean. I do have confidence that like, if Jesse does lose somebody early on like that, he'll be able to ingratiate himself back into the crew proper.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else about Vesi today?
No. So, I mean, I think we've sketched out some of the dynamics. I'm excited to be completely invalidated in the next few weeks when Survivor 43 ends up airing. I mean, again, this is assumed to be the powerhouse tribe. I think just given like the physical makeup, the fact that there doesn't seem to be any like huge train wrecky contestants on this tribe in comparisons to the others, people are expecting them to be, to Jesse's point, the stable force in this season. But you never know the way these challenges might fall. They might get ooh-ah'd and get cut down to 2 before the merge happens.
Okay. All right, Mike, great job with all these. We will be back. What tribe will we be talking about next?
So we will talk about Coco next time going out. That is going to be Cassidy. That is going to be Gio, James, Carla, Lindsay, and Ryan are the 6 members of Coco.
Okay. All right. Well done, Mike. Where can people check out everything else you're doing for Survivor 43?
Parade.com is where it is at. Again, 2 interviews a day, including weekends. Tony and Jeremy will probably debate as to like what weekends include. But yeah, posting through the weekend, through the holiday, basically 9 days straight of a Survivor interview. So 4 up so far, but posting over at Parade.com, the written versions of these interviews. And I plugged all the other stuff we were doing in the First Impressions podcast in terms of stuff on reality TV wrap-ups and post-show recaps. There's a lot going on, but I'm happy to have the gnarly podcasts that are these Survivor cast interviews as well. 1 down, 2 to go, Rob, and I'm having a lot of fun so far.
Well, Mike, again, thank you for all of your work that you do to get these set up and ready for us to listen to here on these preview episodes. It's a lot of fun. I feel like I really have a good sense of who these 6 people are, and I'm very much looking forward to watching them play in the season. We will have much more coverage coming your way for that. So make sure, again, you're subscribed. robhasawebsite.com/subscribe and everything else we're doing over on RHAP with all of the reality shows that are either on now or about to kick off. It's going to be a very busy fall, and it's a great time to become a patron of Rob as a Podcast with everything that we have going on between all of the bonus shows, between the RHAP community, and of course, that we will let you know first when we have any events coming up here in the fall for you to come and see us in person. robhasawebsite.com/patron. Mike, anything else?
No, I think we've got, to your point, like a really good sense of this cast. Really enjoying this group so far. A perfect mixture of just really dynamic stories, different ways to approach the game, with a lot of silliness in there thrown in as well, which is the making of some of my favorite Survivor seasons. So I'm looking forward to seeing, what the other 66% of the cast is like. But so far, 33% of the way through, I'm a big old thumbs up on them.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.